Welcome to Heroes Have Wings, the podcast that gives a voice to the unsung heroes of Army Aviation. I'm your host, Jason Santiago. For the Army aviators, crew chiefs, and flight medics who put it all on the line in the heat of battle, this is their opportunity to share untold stories of courage, sacrifice, and unbreakable will. From their beginnings to the battlefield, you hear about their hardships, the moments of doubt, and how they overcame impossible odds to save lives. These warriors didn't just fight for survival, they put others above themselves, embodying the true spirit of heroism and selfless service. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Heroes Have Wings. Welcome to another powerful episode of Heroes Have Wings, where we dive into the lives of leaders who not only walk the path, but pave the way for others. I'm your host, Jason Santiago, and today we've got an absolute legend joining us, Jamie Halchishick, a retired Army Aviation Command Sergeant Major with 30 years of service, a college graduate with a master's degree from the University of Texas, and co-founder of Map Your Journey LLC. Jamie is the embodiment of resilience, leadership, and faith. From the humble beginnings in rural Northern California to becoming a driving force behind leader development and prevention of harmful behavior, Jamie's journey is one of faith, family, and service. He's a proud husband and a father of four who's turned challenges into triumphs, from his time in Folsom Prison to homesteading with his family. Jamie is living proof that life's trials can become the foundation for building a legacy that is lasting and impactful. Today, he's here to share how he's helping others design and live out their life's purpose through leadership, development, homesteading, and his epic RV adventure across the country with his wife. You don't want to miss a second of this conversation. Jamie Halchishick, welcome to Heroes Have Wings.
Hey, thanks, brother. It's my great privilege to be here with you today, and I really appreciate it.
And I appreciate you being here. I haven't seen you in a while. How's life been treating you?
Hey, I know I was thinking that the other day. It's been more years than I got fingers, I think, which is
Yeah,
is not good. I mean, we've
it
talked a
isn't.
couple times, but in just to answer your question, man, life is good,
That's
um,
good, man.
and I'm blessed and I'm thankful. Uh, doing as an army career isn't easy. But
Oh yeah, it is.
if you can make it to the end, um,
Yep.
it's a blessing.
Yeah. One thing I love about the Army, and I know you could attest to this as well, is the relationships that you make in the Army. For example, we haven't seen each other probably in over a decade, but I know if I needed you, all I got to do is call you and you'd be there for me. If I ever was in El Paso, I call you. I know you take care of me, and I'd reciprocate that back with you. So one of the best things the Army has done, and one of the things I do miss, is those relationships.
I agree, and I think sometimes it's not talked about as much.
Yeah.
The power of those relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure we'll get into this a little more deeper in the podcast, but I feel the same way, man. We touched base the other day for the first time in a long time, and
Yeah.
in some ways, it feels like I just saw you the other day,
Yeah.
and in
I
some ways, it
agree.
feels like, has it really been 10 years?
Yeah.
But whether it was in real time, when we're serving together,
Mm-hmm.
um, and one of us is in, whether it's just, hey, I need a little help with something, or whether you're in a pretty significant pinch or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or fast forward 20, 30, 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's so powerful to have people that you trust,
Oh yeah.
that you can reach out to, and man, they will be there for you one
Oh,
way
I'm
or another.
coming. That's what I tell people. I'm coming. So. All right. So one thing I like to do in the beginning, after your intro, we do a little chatting. I like to play a little game. I call it quick hits. All right. I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, one or two things. It's two things, and you just pick one of them, okay?
Okay.
And it's I think it's about 8 things. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with that.
All right, let's do it.
Coffee, energy drinks,
Ooh, coffee.
city life, country living,
Country living.
summer heat, winter cold,
Summer heat.
movies or books,
What was that one?
movies or books.
Man, I used to be a book guy, but now I fall asleep if I read, so I'm gonna have to go movies.
All right. Dog person or cat person?
Dog person, totally.
Yeah, love it. Beach vacation, mountain retreat.
Ooh, yes. Oh, I gotta pick one.
Uh,
Let's go with the beach. Let's go with the beach.
all right, like that. Wake up early, stay up late.
Stay up late.
Oh, me too, baby. Let's do it.
Night
Action
shift.
movie. Yeah, action movies or comedies.
Ooh, that's another double yes. Let's
Okay.
go.
Hey, that's
Let's go comedies, man. I mean,
okay.
I try to be a lighthearted guy. I need some laughter and some enjoyment in my life, even from the movies.
Yeah. Okay. Camping or road trip.
Ooh. Well, when you got an RV, you do both. I'm
Yeah.
gonna say I'm gonna say camping.
All right, love it. Texting or calling.
Which one do I do more of? I do more texting, but
I think we
I
all do.
prefer to pick up the phone, especially if it's for my people. Come on, I want to hear your voice.
Oh yeah.
So it's gonna be a phone call.
Yep. I'm the same way. Oh, that's excellent, man. We got a lot of similarities. It's funny because with Sam, all three of us were all stay up late guys. I don't know if it's because of the army or what, but we all stay up late. I love it.
But
But all right,
I
so
don't have to get
what's
up
gonna
early anymore. Yeah,
exactly? I think that's what it was, right? The whole getting up really early for the army. So I still get up early, but nothing crazy.
yeah, same.
All right, so what we're gonna do now? I just want to, like I said, we're gonna paint a picture. You're the artist of your life. And I want the audience to know what it looks like when one, you join the army, two, what leads you to join the army, because we all have our story, right? Your experience is reaching the highest rank in the army as a command sergeant major, which I knew when I first met you, you were gonna be. I'm surprised you weren't the command sergeant major of the army as good as you were. All right, but
And don't wish that on me.
love it. So we're just gonna paint that picture, and essentially, we're doing this like we talked on the phone. I want to give aviation guys a platform to tell their stories because I think it's something that's missing in the podcast space. But the biggest issue I have, and it's not even an issue, I think we're so important in the military, in the army, on the battle space, and I think it's we have a very thankless job, right? A lot of people want us around, but they never thank us for doing the things that we do. So I just want to give guys like you that platform. All right. So early life, childhood, where'd you grow up?
All right, man. So I'm originally from Northern California, about an
Mm-hmm.
hour north of Sacramento. Which,
Okay.
if people are not familiar, it's kind of where the agricultural valley meets
Yeah.
the base of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and so I'm a little bit in the middle, definitely inland. Uh, like I said, I grew up in California, but I think I saw a beach like one time in my whole life before I joined the army. I was just gonna say, I was born in the Bay Area in Oakland. My dad was in the Coast
Okay.
Guard um, when I was born, and unfortunately, when I was before I can remember, probably 2 years old, my parents split in the early '70s,
Mm,
and we ended up living with my grandparents, my mom's parents. They had owned
okay.
businesses their whole life. They were they owned a restaurant. When I say businesses, like one at a time. They owned and worked
Yeah.
in a restaurant, just a family restaurant. The earliest I
Yep.
remember is that it was a small cafe in a bowling alley in Oakland, California.
Okay.
So after
So
it wasn't
when
but a
you
few years.
when your parents got that divorce, when your parents got that divorce, was your dad still in the picture or were or was he just doing the
No,
Coast
man,
Guard thing and
he was
then
not. He was
you and
not
your
in the
mom?
picture for a while.
Mm,
We didn't reconnect until like I was in high school,
wow.
and I'll tell you a little bit about that when I get there because that was a big deal for me. But
Yeah.
we yeah, and I can barely remember this part I'm talking about right now. I mean, I was younger than 5. I think I was right about that
Yeah.
age when my grandparents retired. They sold their last business. They retired, and we moved up north out of the Bay Area, and that's where we got into
Mhm.
the Oroville, Chico, Yuba City, Marysville kind of area, just above Lake Oroville. For people that know where it is, it's that dam
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
overflowed a few years ago there in Northern California.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, we went up there, and I lived kind of a carefree, spoiled life for about another 5 or 6 years. I mean, living with my grandparents. My mom was there as well. She was
Okay.
working, you know. It was kind
Yeah.
of in the foothills of the mountains. So, young boy, man,
Mhm.
I'm running around, you know, all over there, just having fun, getting
Yeah.
in trouble
So how
for
was
getting on the
how
golf
was
course.
that dynamic? How was that dynamic with you now your dad's gone, you're living with your grandparents, uh, and now it's just your mom? Was your grandfather, like, the man in your life or
He was, he was, and so very powerful shaping for me.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, I see him as a good man. He had a very strong sense of humor.
Yes.
He was very loving, and um, probably to a little bit of a fault for me as a young kid. He would
Yeah.
do just about anything for me. So I was kind of spoiled uh, in some ways. I mean, we
When
weren't
you say
living
spoiled, what
the
do you
really
mean?
good life. I mean, we were living in a double wide mobile home in a retirement community,
Okay, okay.
you know. So it
So
wasn't like, go
when you
ahead.
say you're spoiled, what exactly do you mean?
What I mean is, like I didn't have up to the age of probably 10 or 11. I didn't have any chores, really.
Oh, okay.
You
Yeah.
know, like I said, my grandparents ran a restaurant, so they were all cooks, and so I think I was the only grandchild. You know, so Grandpa would always hook me up if we were like
Yeah.
running buddies. You know, so
Yep.
if I wanted a hamburger for breakfast, dude would jump up there and make me a hamburger, much
Man.
to my mom and grandma's chagrin. You know, I'd be like, "What are you doing feeding
Yeah.
that boy a hamburger for breakfast?" And she's like, "Leave the boy alone."
Yeah.
And, man,
How did
we were
that
tight.
relationship with your grandfather impact you at that young age of 10? Well, we'll say middle school through high school. How did that help you become the young man you were and the man you are today?
So my takeaways from him is was really about seeing what a loving father slash grandfather figure can look like
Ooh,
in life.
that is
Because I had
key.
a much different experience a couple years later. Uh, like I said, he's very lighthearted, always like telling jokes,
Mhm.
and he really cared, man. Like I don't think I ever saw that dude angry. Maybe one time in my whole life, and I would, looking back now, I'm not sure I would call that angry, but for him, he was just really
Yeah.
easygoing, and you know, if there was something come up, we'll figure it out. Oh, come on, and he was a big family guy. We wanted to, you know, spend family time, and those are just big
Mhm.
takeaway. He was a believer,
Yep.
you know, left a big legacy. Those kind of things left a big legacy for me.
So with the love and the nurturing characteristic and dynamic you're getting from your grandfather, how did that number one, I want you to tell the audience how important that is coming from a male, right? Because we're both fathers, right? You have 4, I have 5 myself. And that's one thing I like to display, like show our children, show society that you know what, fathers, our children do need our love. And in the process of giving them love, we still have to provide that discipline, right? So you receiving that love from your grandfather, how important that was to you when you started becoming a father yourself?
So it was huge, man. It was foundational. You know, there's a lot of life that happened in between those two things that you just talked about, but I remember being a young father. scared because I didn't
Yep.
really have much of a father figure in my life. I did have a stepfather. Later on, I'll tell you some more about that. That's where things got a
Yep.
little dicey.
We're gonna get to that.
But I would call back on those memories, of my grandfather and how you could be firm but fair and loving.
Oh
And
yeah.
then and trust me, like I didn't even in the early years of fatherhood, I wasn't even close to having it all together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think I ever had it all together,
Yeah.
but I knew a
I
couple
don't
of
think we
things.
ever have it together.
No, no, but I knew a couple of things were going to be important to me, and even now, I say that to my son, the oldest, now who's man, he's going to be 34 in a few months, and
Man.
he's got three kids of his own. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I tell him, I said, hey, and I told this to myself back then. I said, Ben, his name is Ben. I said, we're going to break the cycle of bad fathers in this family.
Let's go.
And again, I wasn't a perfect dad, and he's not a perfect dad either. But compared to some of the stuff that I saw when I was a teenager,
Yeah.
and then I know what our fathers and their fathers, for the most part, a lot of them dealt with toxic, you know,
Oh
disciplinarian
yeah.
or alcoholic or
Yep.
combination of all those things. And
Yep.
I had a little dose of that for a few years, as a teenager, and I just knew what I'm not going to be was that. And then I
Mm-hmm.
knew the things from my grandfather that, I wanted to incorporate. And even now, as a grandfather myself
Yeah.
of three, um, trying to do those things that are most important.
Yeah.
I do find myself
So
doing a
let's
little
talk. Let's
bit
talk
of
about that.
disciplinary stuff, but it's all good.
Yeah, yeah. We're dads. We gotta do the disciplinary stuff, right?
Yep.
Grandfather. So it's part of our I call it our job title, right? So you mentioned stepfather. All right. So if you want to get it, let's get into that for a little bit. Did your dad ever come back into the picture? Your real dad?
He did. So my biological father came back in the picture just about maybe a year before I graduated high school.
Okay. How was that?
So it was interesting. It was a little.
Mm,
I was a little nervous about it
mm-hmm.
at first, not sure what to expect. What I had heard from my family as I was growing up,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, and even in the later years, is that he ended up getting kicked out of the Coast Guard. He struggled with alcohol and drugs for a
Mm,
long time,
yeah.
most of his life. And I don't want to get too far ahead, but one of the things that I really loved about him is I continued to grow my relationship with him, kind of in
Yeah.
spurts throughout my
Mm-hmm.
life. Is that at one point, probably in his mid to late 40s, he was finally able to turn that around, and he became a counselor for troubled children that were dependents on drugs and alcohol, stuff like that. And the folks that I talked to that he mentored and coached through those struggles, and even family members and friends, they said he was just amazing. Part
Man.
of it was his demeanor, part of it was his care, part of it was he'd been there, so
Yep.
he could talk it.
Yep. I
But
think one of the biggest things I'm getting from that, and it's something I try to tell everybody, it's never too late to change your life. Never. No matter what's happening, you just have to figure out how you're going to change it and get the help, right?
absolutely,
So
and
it's never
sometimes,
too late. And that's
nah,
sometimes we as leaders, we have to make sure that the people that we impact their lives, we have to remind them of that. Like, hey, don't quit on yourself. Let's just try to get through this. Let's try to figure out a way. So, a huge shout out to your pops. I just want to say that. All right, for you know getting the help he needed and then becoming a counselor and a vessel to impact and help change other people's lives, which is that's an amazing thing. Not only did he help himself, now he's helping others. So at what point in your life did the stepfather come into the picture, and how did that pan out?
Yeah, so it was like I think I was in sixth grade, and my mom just told us we were up at my grandparents' house, and she said, "Hey, we're gonna move out. We're gonna go move in." I had a friend that I had met in school, and she
Yeah.
became friends with his mom. So we moved downtown. It was a small town, but we moved
Hmm.
downtown, and we all shared like a four-bedroom house or something. They had two kids, and it was me and my mom, and I think we were living there a few months. I don't even remember how long it was, and my friend's mom's, you know, small towns boy, her uh, ex-husband was had some kind of issue and needed a place to stay, so he came and stayed there for a while, and apparently him and my mom kind of hooked up. So
Mm,
fast forward a few months, maybe a year or so, they were a thing, and they ended up getting married. Um,
okay.
Gosh, I was probably 12.
Okay. How did you feel at 12 years old having a stepfather now? And then
So
moving to the house with him?
yeah, so it was big change, man, big change.
Yeah,
So
that's
I went
huge.
from the spoiled, if you will, the spoiled kid that got to kind of do whatever he wanted, um,
Mhm.
to, I mean, he ran in his house like a daggone prison camp, and
Ah,
it was pretty extreme at some points, and especially with alcohol, and he ended up getting into drugs, and there was a lot of emotional and physical abuse,
yeah.
and it was tough, man. It was tough.
So you, age 12, starting to go and experiencing, first of all, that had a bit of culture shock because you going from living a good life with your grandparents and then with your mom, and then now this man's introduced to your life, and it was like pretty much a shell shock, wasn't it?
It really was. He was an army vet, Vietnam
Mm.
era. He didn't deploy to Vietnam. They sent him to Korea
Oh,
during
okay.
Vietnam, which is kind of funny because I enlisted during the Gulf War and they sent me to Korea too. But we'll get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a huge shock, man. Like psychologically,
Yeah.
um, but it's
Now you were
interesting, man. I could tell you 100 stories about the pain and the emotional struggles watching
Mhm.
watching my parents and some of their drug friends do lines of a crank off of one of my baby pictures in a frame or something,
Shit.
or
Man, bro.
seeing some of the stuff that goes down all the way to like the physical stuff. He was a little dude, like he was like 5'2", but
Really?
and then for those that don't know, I'm 6'5", and
Oh,
as a
you're a huge
teenager,
dude.
like I was already getting to be, that height, pretty close to it. But that dude was strong, man. He worked in a lumber mill most of his life. He was a really strong dude, and which was
Mhm.
awesome when he was sober and we were doing, some work in the yard or whatever, or projects. But when he start drinking or doing drugs and things would turn a little violent, not awesome.
Yeah.
That little dude would throw me around like a daggone, you know,
Yeah.
stuffed animal.
So did you have to see, was he physical with your mom as well, or
So
just you?
not that I know of. But I mean, he was
Okay.
real loud. He was a yeller as
Mhm.
well. I heard a lot of verbal abuse towards her,
Mm,
but to my knowledge, he never touched her.
okay. So that you're going through all that with your stepfather, and you're going through all this pain. At what point did you realize, all right, I got to get out of here, and I have to join? I have to get out of here. Like, at what point did you realize I'm going to the army, or what was your thought process?
Yeah, so let me give you a couple things that built up to that.
Okay,
So one
perfect.
day, I think I was probably a freshman in high school. I get home from school. I had to ride my bike. Like, no kidding. I had to ride my bike 4 miles away to get to school guy,
Yeah.
because where we lived, if I'd have rode the bus or whatever, I would have had to go to school with a different group of kids I'd never met from when we moved downtown.
Mm,
And of course, I wanted to go to school with the kids that I grew up with. So
yep.
anyway, so I get home on my bike, and there's all kinds of commotion at the house. And my stepdad had got in a physical altercation with his sister-in-law, his brother's wife, over a drug
Damn.
thing. And
Mm-hmm.
she attacked him, and he hit her, and she got hurt pretty bad. And he ended up going to prison. He spent a few months in
Mm.
in county jail, and then to get to in the intro, you talked about my short time in Folsom Prison. Just to
Yeah, I want to get to that.
alleviate anybody's concerns, I didn't get sentenced to Folsom Prison. He got sentenced to Folsom Prison, and we
Okay.
would go down there periodically. My mom would take us down there, and we'd have to go visit him. So I spent,
Mm,
a couple times down there, either on a day visit, going to climbing through the old, cold, wet stone, and but I mean, it's crazy being a young kid seeing all that stuff, man. I still never forget some of the things I saw, and just kind of the smell and feel of all that there. And then sometimes, like once or twice a
yeah.
year, they get what they call a conjugal visit. So we get the luxury of staying the
Mm-hmm.
entire weekend in Folsom Prison in some like little apartment where they could lock themselves in a bedroom, and I'll watch TV for a weekend. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I say all that because when he went to prison, uh, it sort of gave me a newfound freedom again. Although I
Mm-hmm.
had experienced a lot
Mm,
of his probably well intentioned but horrible delivery in establishing
yeah.
discipline in what he saw, in his stepson.
Mm-hmm.
And but man, I immediately saw oh no, I'm free now, and it's on. So
Yeah.
although I was in the big scheme of things, I was a pretty good kid. But I did quickly turn again and start doing a lot more of the things that I wanted to do, instead of stuff like he would have
Mm-hmm.
done if he was still there. And then I made that
Yeah.
through about my
So were
senior
you
year of high school, and still
you were the
living there.
only
And
child, right?
say again.
You were the only child?
So I was an only child, but I had a stepsister through him, and
Okay.
she lived with us
Okay.
for some of that time. Which is a whole nother ball of
How
wax. Because
how was that relationship between them two?
weird. It
Okay.
just because he would sort of spoil her. His theory there was, spoil the girls and make men out of the boys,
Mm-hmm.
and he told me that quite a bit, as you can imagine. Um, but at the same time, like he was toxic to everybody. So
Mm,
I wouldn't say they had a good relationship at all. In fact, later in life, he passed away last year, in this
mm.
month, actually in October. But and my stepsisters was still living with him and my mom, after
Really?
being homeless and having two children from two different homeless guys, and just just the crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Craziness.
so as I get to that point, I think I just started my senior year, maybe finishing my junior
Mm-hmm.
year in high school. He gets paroled, and he gets to come home, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing this again. So now I'm like 17. So I called my grandfather, and I said, hey, this is going on. I think it'll be a problem. if he and I are here together, would you guys care if I came in and lived my last year of high school up there with you? And of course, it's my grandfather. So he's like, nah, come on.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And it was probably better for the family,
Mm-hmm.
although there were still some challenges there. Just
Okay.
because now I'm not living with my mom, I'm living with her parents, but it's all good. I was a pretty good kid in school. Graduated high school. I was going to go to college. Nobody in my family had went to college for like 4 generations. So
Yep.
I think I
So
was. Go
what was
ahead.
that pivotal moment? What was that pivotal moment when you said I'm going to the army?
So I went to community college for 1 year after high school. I was going to be a firefighter. In
That's
California,
crazy. I did the same thing.
That's reliable work, because
Yeah.
California burns down every year, so it's good job security. And me and one of my buddies, we wanted to be smoke jumpers. What we talked about. We found out about it.
Nice. Yeah.
Parachute behind the wildfires and do all this crazy stuff. And I even went to like the fire academy and all that stuff there. They had one at that community college, and it was interesting. But then the Desert Storm, Desert Shield, all that stuff kicked off.
Yep.
1991. That's the time frame. And Mr. Recruiter, who'd been working on me and a couple of my buddies, for a couple of years, was like, "Hey, man,
Yeah.
big bonuses, pay for college." And at the time, like I wouldn't say struggling, but I had Pell Grants that I applied
Mm-hmm.
for. I was a busboy at the nicest restaurant in town. There's a little steakhouse called the Depot. It's kind of cool because it was an old train depot, and the old trains from out west, they just every once in a while they just drive right through. You'd be sitting there eating
Mm-hmm.
eating your steak or whatever, and the train just right there out these glass windows. For a 17-year-old kid, I was making pretty good money doing that because I worked real hard to try to take care of the servers and everybody else in the restaurant, and so they gave us a portion of their tips. So I don't remember what
Mm-hmm.
minimum wage was back then. It wasn't much. It was probably like $2.75 or $3 or something like that an hour.
Yeah.
But I was
That
going
sounds
home
about
even
right.
then. Hey man, even back then in like 1990, I was going home with like 30, 40, $50 in cash in my pocket every night. And
Oh, that's good.
and that was good, helped me pay for what I
Mm-hmm.
expenses for school, but it was also helping me pay for, some other things that I shouldn't have been getting into. I started going down the road, like a lot of
Mm,
unfortunately young men do. I started going down alcohol and I think drugs is big everywhere now, but back then, I mean,
yeah.
it was pretty big in the area. I mean, I grew up all around it. My stepfather.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna ask you. Do you think being exposed to it by your stepfather, you think that had an impact on you?
So absolutely, and it's kind of weird because it had impact on me in a couple different ways. When I had that little bit of freedom that last couple of years, like I wanted to, I wanted to see what that was like. Well,
Yeah.
let me taste some of the forbidden fruit. But what I saw
Mm-hmm.
was people that I grew up with and people that I graduated with were getting sucked into that drug culture and that drug life. And I saw some really smart, capable people getting themselves in a life that I knew that I did not want to be involved in. And
Mm-hmm.
it just, you know, timing, the way things work, uh, with the war and everything that came in as an opportunity. And actually, me and a couple of my buddies, we all did it together. We all joined
Mm-hmm.
together. I think we
Did y'all
all,
do the whole? Y'all went the basic together?
yeah, it was like the buddy program or whatever, And
Yeah,
I think
buddy
we all
program.
got
That's what it
we
was.
all got like PV2 because we refer to each
Yeah.
other or something. And
Yeah. So
so, and we go ahead.
how was your mom's reaction and your grandparents' reaction when you told them, "Hey, I'm joining the army"?
Yes, that's a good question. So my grandparents were not happy at first. One,
Ooh,
they they were concerned because the country was at war. Uh, Two, I was
which
going to
is
be the
fair.
first kid to go to college. I was the first kid to go to college in the family in a long, long time,
Mhm.
over 50 years, and they weren't real
Wow.
happy that I was putting that on hold.
Yeah.
And But at the same time, they were also supportive of me. So, and they knew that some of the benefits more than I did. Even I wasn't smart enough, wise enough to realize all the good stuff that I was about to get myself into. But
Yeah.
it was a, and I've had this discussion a million times, man, with 1,000 people from all around the country and all around the world who may have had a little different experience, but the concept is the same. Is that the military was a way for people who felt like they were stuck, whether it was in their
Oh yeah.
whether it was in the city streets where
Yep.
they were, or some old country, whatever. It doesn't matter what that environment was per se. But I see that commonality,
Man,
and a lot
you
of
hit
us,
that on the head. You
a
hit that
lot of
on the
us
head
use
because
that.
that's
It's
the
the way out. It's the way
yeah,
out.
that's the why I joined the army. I had no money to go to college, right? And I had to leave Connecticut. I just had to leave Connecticut because I know I was destined to do things I didn't want to do. And it's like you said that it was my only way out. So it's I could relate to 100%.
It's funny,
You know
man.
that?
My wife is from the mountains of West Virginia,
Mhm.
and her story's different, obviously, but there's a lot of common themes in there. You know,
Yeah.
most of the people in her town are still in her town. It's a small country. They're mostly good people.
Yep.
Very experienced the last couple of years some of the same things that unfortunately that's happening in Western North Carolina and East Tennessee right now with some of that flooding from the storms, and just because of the terrain and what happens when they
Yeah.
get so much water like that. They went through some of that, and but her story is very similar. In fact, in that the Army, because my wife also is retired military. I did 30 years. She did 32,
Nice. Look at y'all.
and she's
So
also
let
retired.
me
She's also a retired sergeant major, and then I talked to another friend just the other day that was helping me here with some of this. Get is my pre work on the homestead, and I know we'll get to that too. But so he didn't join the
Mhm.
military. He's an electrician, but he used that. It was the same way. He used that skill, that trade, to help him get out. And we've
Yeah.
already. I've only known this dude like less than a year, and we're already sharing stories about how it struggles with.
Mhm.
He's from like the swamps of Louisiana. He's funny,
Damn.
little Cajun dude. I can't even say his name. It's so French.
Yeah.
Lelou or something like that. I shouldn't say it on the podcast. That's right. Good name. But he's
So
like, hey man, I got my daughters and my grandkids, and
mhm.
I can't get my extended family out of there. I try to tell them, hey, there's life, there's real life out there in this wonderful country that you can go find and work for yourself and follow your, hey, if your dream is to stay in your hometown and do what you want to do, that's fine. But you don't have to. And a lot of people feel
Yep, you
like
don't
they're
have to.
trapped, I think. And there's
Yeah.
opportunity that so many people could. I know because we did it.
Yeah. It's a big mentality shift, man, because same thing, I go back to Connecticut and I see everybody still there and I'm just like, man, like, do y'all know there's a whole world out there? Like a
Oh
whole
yeah.
world and you can do whatever you want. It's like you think about it, it's comparable to a movie. Think about it. You just have to make the choice every day. It's all about choices. And that's what I want to get into. So you decide to join the army. What was your first MOS when you joined the army?
It's my first MOS was 11 Bravo. I was infantry, baby.
Let's go, baby. So
Hey, I've seen
would you
this recruiter. This wasn't his first rodeo. Uh, he showed me this little movie. It was on a laser disc for all the kids that watch podcasts nowadays. A laser disc was like before DVDs. They were like this big,
Mhm. That
right? And they
big. I
put it in
remember
this.
that.
It looked like a record player, but with a chrome record. They stick that in there, and they showed me this little movie with this guy's in like BDUs with his little soft cap, got nothing but like a empty pistol belt and a canteen. He's like
Looking
running through the
sexy.
woods, slide for life, jumping out of airplanes. I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to do that.
Yeah. All right.
He's like,
So
he's like, hey man, you
you go
scored
to
pretty high on your little ASVAB thing. You sure you want to do that? I said, I want to do that. That's what I want to do right there.
you did you do Fort Benning was your basic in AIT?
It was, yeah. I did infantry
Uh,
OSUT at the Fort Begin Again School for Boys, what we used to call it. Not anymore.
yeah,
The world's changed. But
the world has
yeah,
changed.
1991.
Oof.
Uh, I
So,
wasn't a
so
Harmony
you,
Church guy, for the old school. Some of the dudes that are even older than me.
yeah.
I was on Sand Hill, but
So,
yeah, graduated there in '92. Go ahead.
where did you go after basic? And what is it called? OSET.
Yeah, OSA, one station unit training. So,
Yep, I
so
remember that.
basic and AIT. The difference to me was the stroke of midnight.
Hmm.
Same building, same bed, same drill sergeants. My
Yeah.
senior drill sergeant kicked the doors open at like 2 seconds after midnight, and I was having flashbacks to day one because the metal trash cans went flying down the bay again, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Welcome to AIT," and yeah, the only thing that really changed was the training. Everything else is still the
Okay.
same people. There's a funny story. I told you I joined with two of my buddies, right? So one of them,
Hmm.
my friend, he made it like 2 weeks into basic. He shipped out later than us for some reason, a couple weeks, and without us knowing, he like somehow got his contract changed. He decided him and his high school girlfriend were getting married, because we had all on contract going to Korea together.
Yeah.
Well, he switches his contract, and they went to Polk, and he ended up becoming 11
Mm.
Mike, which is funny because I don't think they have that anymore. The mechanized. Back then, it had its own MOS for a while.
Yeah.
So boom, there's one guy gone. Now it's just me and the other guy was actually my cousin, which is really funny because it's the son of the lady who my stepdad beat up, right?
Mm.
So he and I go together. His last name was Gordon. Mine's Hal. G and H. We're like almost bunkmates in the same platoon, in the same. And I thought, and this dude, when I had my 3 years of freedom in high school,
Hmm.
um, so he was a big outdoor guy, man. Big. He's one of those guys that had like a full beard when he was 12.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
kind of he was kind of funny looking dude. He's red hair, like his hair and his beard and his chest hair. It all was one big grown red thing. But I tease him, but he was an incredible dude. Like he was an incredible hunter, and
Hmm.
tracker, and all that kind of stuff. And he taught me a lot of that stuff when I was in the absence of a father who could show me those things. He taught me a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff. So funny story. I'm thinking I thought for sure he was going to be a sniper or something like that. I mean, he was incredible. This dude would shoot pheasants out of the air with a 22 in these rice fields that we used to hunt in and stuff as kids. And that dude made it like 6 weeks and medicaled out. He got
Really?
some big blister on some one of the, we did like some 18-mile road march or something and got some big blister and it got infected. He got cellulitis and he got
Oh,
med dropped. I'm
really?
laying there
And
in bed
that
like,
was the end of his that was the end of his military career.
that was it. And I'm laying there in bed
Man.
that night going, all right, the three of us joined to go do this together. Now, one of them is staying in the States. The other guy's out. I'm going to Korea by myself.
Man.
Like, this is crap.
So you get to Korea. How was Korea? And how many times have you been to Korea?
So, Korea was crazy. Um, and I only went once, my very first duty station. Again, I was 11 Bravo,
Hmm.
PV2. Um, after going through infantry OSET, I played football in high school. I was like 6'5", 240, something like that. Man, I graduated OSET. I was like 6'5", 160 or something. I was like
Mm.
a beanpole. And,
Yeah.
back when we were like 18, 19, whatever. And I
Hmm.
showed up there and, I mean, it was exciting. It was scary. I didn't know what to expect. I ended up going to the 503rd Infantry, which at the time was at Camp Howes. I remember us in the 506. The 506 was the battalion that was north of us, and we'd go up there. We're doing like some DMZ patrols, doing some training up there, and I remember we're sitting in think it was at Chow Hall one night, eating dinner, and we're watching this TV, and George Bush Senior, the president, comes on. There was something that happened
Hmm.
politically across the world, and he makes this public speech about how we have no U.S. troops north of the MGM River, and we all look at each other. Aren't we north of the MGM River, Sergeant? Aren't we north of the MGM? Shut up.
uh,
Oh, goodness.
you and I know the things that we saw on the news never correlated with the things
All
that
right.
when we're in theater and
Yeah,
with other things.
shock.
So how long were you in Korea for? A year?
So I did 1 year. I did pretty well. I got my EIB when I was like a PFC, and
Hmm.
my expert industry badge. For those that don't know what an EIB is, I was pretty happy about that. It's the first time I ever saw a general
Hmm.
that came down, putting you a little badge on. I don't think I could stand at attention any
Yeah.
harder than that. I was so scared. I'm like, man, if my squad leader's mean and my platoon sergeant hates me, and first sergeant will kill me, what's a general gonna do? You know, I'm like, so.
Exactly.
But
Incinerate you.
it was good,
So
man.
where'd you go to after Korea?
So after Korea, I almost stayed. They was going to promote me to corporal and make me a team leader if I
Hmm.
stayed, like, and extended for another 6 months. And I was like, you know what? I just can't do it. I just can't do it. I was supposed to, by contract, go back to California, go back to Fort Ord. I was in, actually, unbeknownst to me at the time, I was in the Manchu regiment, the old Manchus, and they would rotate from
Mm,
Ord to Korea. 7th ID and in the 9th Infantry Regiment.
okay.
Um, but the world changed, and Fort Ord got shut down, and I got
Hmm.
orders to the 101st Airborne Division, Fort Campbell,
As an
Kentucky,
as an 11 Bravo?
as an 11 Bravo.
Okay.
And I was like, airborne, because that's the one thing I wanted to do, man. That's what I saw the guy in the video doing. Jump. I'm like, I want to
Yeah.
jump out of my airplane. And the recruiter's like,
Mhm.
man, that's not a job. Like, you can't just jump out of an airplane. You got to have a job and jump out of an airplane. And he's like, don't
Yeah.
worry. When you get to your duty station, you'll be able to go airborne. Don't worry about that. I got to Korea, and the
Mhm.
first thing I asked was, Sergeant, can I go to airborne school? And they're like,
Shut
you know how
up.
expensive it is to send somebody to airborne school from Korea? Shut up. Yes, Sergeant. So, like, then I got my little orders, or whatever. Back then, who we get? We get the little green things in the mail from HRC or whatever. I can't
Yeah,
remember
that
what it
was
was.
old school.
That may have been later
I don't even
too. I
think
don't
I
know.
got that.
I was like,
So
101st Airborne. Man, I gotta jump out of airplanes there.
mhm.
So that was my first introduction to the greater Tennessee, Kentucky area. I went there, and this is another funny story. So I was in a cohort unit, which they had back then, and it wasn't the only time they ever had cohort units, but they don't always have. So, like, a big chunk of my unit PCS at the same time, which was kind
Mm,
of crazy. But almost all of them went to, for people that are familiar with the 101st and Fort Campbell, almost all of them went to 2nd Brigade and 1st Brigade. And when we're at replacement, they're like, hey, man, as long as you don't go to 3rd Brigade, to the Rakkasans, you'll be all right.
yeah.
And of course, I get my orders, and they're like, oh, you're going to 3rd Brigade. I'm like, oh, man. And then
Rakkasan still have that reputation to this day, so
I get to that part, and they're like, well, as long as you don't go to 3rd Battalion, you'll be all right. And of course, then I get my orders. I'm going to 3rd Battalion. And my battalion commander was, you know, I know you heard this name, Lieutenant Colonel David Petraeus was my battalion
really?
commander. And
Man.
man, it was a trip. And so let me tell you a funny story real quick. So I'm sitting in the S1 specialist How. I was in a line company in Korea, and I was a
Yeah.
big dude, right? So all I did was just carry like 100 pounds of stuff up and down
I was
mountains
gonna
in
say,
Korea.
you carried the heavy shit. Big
Yeah,
dude, you're carrying the heavy shit.
they love the dude in weapon squad, so I didn't get moved to weapon squad. I was a saw gunner, but
Yeah.
so I carried all that crap. So I'm thinking I'm going to go to a line company, and then I hear him talking in the S1. They're like, "Hey, we need people down in Delta Company." I'm like, "Delta Company? What's Delta Company?" Well, at the time in the infantry battalion, that was tow gunners, and I was like, I'm thinking Humvee. I don't have to walk all that, you know.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think I walked like every square inch of Korea in the year I was there. And for people who watch this and never experienced the joy of a 50 or 100-mile foot march
yeah.
carrying 100
It's
pounds
a
of
lot of
gear,
walking.
it sucks.
Yeah.
Good thing we were 18, 19. But
Oh, yeah. It's a young man's
that's where I
world.
thought I was going, man. I thought I was going to the Humvee company. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm
Mhm.
gonna be a 50 cal gunner and tow missiles and all that stuff. This is gonna be awesome. And all of a sudden, like the door to S1 gets kicked off the hinges, and this dude comes in. He's got like Ranger tabs, got Super Tower of Power, and Combat Scroll, and all this stuff. And big, muscly looking dude. And he's like, S1, I need people in the scout platoon. And I'm thinking, scout platoon? What's this? What's a scout platoon do? I don't even know what that is. I'm like, aren't they Op 4 or something?
Mhm.
I don't even know. So long story short, I got assigned to the scout platoon. It's like me and this medic were the only two dudes in the whole platoon that weren't like airborne ranger qualified, and so I
Yeah.
had a little bit of a learning curve, and a lot of crap talking, and but I
One
had to.
thing one thing I appreciate about the military is, we talk a lot of crap to each other. Like, it is 24 hours of straight hazing and just crushing each other, but you get used to it after a while, right?
Yeah, that's
You get a
great.
thick
That's
skin
great.
for it. So how long were you at 11 Bravo before you decided to switch over to aviation?
That's a good question, man. So I ended up loving being in a scout platoon,
Mhm.
reconnaissance mission. My entire year in the line company was pretty much, you know, make sure you have your weapon and your ammo, and you just follow the
Yep.
guy in front of you. And if we make contact, saw a gunner, you start laying down suppressive fire, and then you just follow commands. I get there, I get made an assistant team leader. Ended up later on becoming the platoon leader's RTO. Basically I got a lot of freedoms and
Yeah.
authorities that, in my experience, junior enlisted soldiers didn't get much of. Doing
Mhm.
guide missions, leading line companies into their objective uh, as a young specialist, things like that. Doing call for fire, and it was
Yep.
just good. It was great. My goal, I carried an AM radio for a while, and my first lieutenant was a SF guy. He was a triple MLS SF guy that went to OCS, and of course they don't have lieutenants in special forces, so he had to do some line time till he made
Mhm.
captain. So that
Mhm.
dude, in some ways, it was like having my stepdad again. But at the same time, he was more like a tough love dude. He
Yeah.
he taught me a lot. So I love that. I ended up being in the best shape of my life. We did PT differently than most people did. We ran a lot. It sucked at first, but once I got in the
Mhm.
shape that they wanted us to be in, like I was in the best shape of my life, endurance wise and all that stuff. But so I loved it.
Yeah.
But there came a time where I, I met I met a girl in Nashville,
Mm.
and all of a sudden things started getting serious, and I was like, I love the Army, but if I'm about to get serious in life and relationships and all that kind of stuff, I probably need to figure out something that can teach me a trade
Yeah.
or something that I can use after the Army.
Yep.
So back then, I went in the old MOS catalog. I was coming up my reenlistment window. It was a book that was like this big,
Mhm.
and I'm just looking through it one day, looking at different MOSs. What do they do? I think I had it narrowed down to three. I was either going to be a parachute rigger because I knew
Mhm.
that if I became a rigger, that I had to go to airborne school because there's another million stories why they wouldn't let me go when I was at Campbell that first time. So first you had to go to air assault school, then I had to go to pre-ranger. And, I do that and I do this and I do that. It'd always be something else, man. And they never sent
Yeah.
me to jump school. But anyway, uh, or I knew I loved the reconnaissance mission, and I heard about 19 Deltas, right? Cav Scout. I'm like, oh man, they got an MOS
Mm.
for scouts. I'm like, that's kind of cool. Plus, I think they had back then they had the 113s, big
Yep.
mechanized vehicles, and I was like,
Yep.
ooh, I can ride around in that and never have to walk again. And then I was flipping some more pages, and I saw back then it was 67 Tango Black Hawk Crew Chief, and I was like, "What?" I'm like, "That's a job?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that." So I'm like, I can learn about helicopters and aircraft, and I
Yep.
mean, I couldn't even spell UH-60 back then, but still, I knew that there was going to be something beneficial in my life, or it could
Yeah.
be if I was to use it. So I signed up for that, and the great part was I only had to wait 13 months for an AIT course, so I
Man.
got to hang around in the battalion for another year,
He-
and they
For
all knew I was reclassing.
that had to be interesting. I know the hazing and the crap talking
Yeah,
they gave you for that.
yeah, it was awesome.
Where did you go to AIT for being a crew chief down at Rucker?
So I went to Fort Eustis in Virginia.
Eustis. Okay.
That's where all the maintainers went there. And Rucker was for the enlisted folks. It was more for the flat ops guys and the air traffic
Okay.
controllers.
Okay. And Rutgers now Novasil for our audience
Right.
in case they're not familiar. All right, so you become a crew chief. Where did they send you after you finish AIT for being a crew chief?
Yeah. So great question. So first of all, day one, Fort Eustis, I show up there and I see this big sign on the hangar. It says Tactical Transport Helicopter Repair. And there's formation and they're calling out names and there's a staff sergeant out front. And I'm like, wait, I think I'm in the wrong place. So I say, hey, Sergeant, I see the big sign, and I reenlisted to be a crew chief, not repair. And he's like, shut up and get in formation. So
I love
at
the
the time, I
Army.
didn't know that a crew chief was a mechanic on flight status.
Yeah.
And I went to the
Love it.
school. Big change for me.
Oh yeah.
13-week AIT, very very technical job versus tactical. I did love. I didn't have a lot of experience in mechanical stuff. I had a little bit, but I liked it,
Hmm. Yeah.
and it really clicked. We had some reclasses in there. Like I had an old Huey guy and some other guys in there too that would help us understand a little more
Yeah.
than just going through the doctrinal stuff. But anyway, so 13 weeks of that, I was TDY in
Jamie,
return.
Jamie, before you get there, I just want to paint a picture for our audience, all right?
Okay.
Like Jamie just said, this guy, he went from 11 Bravo, which is like it's a tough world. You're doing a lot of it's a tough world. We've been to places in Afghanistan when we get out to certain remote fobs and the 11 Bravo guys out there, they're living a tough life. All right. So it's a tough world out there. And just their demeanor is it's mission first. Like you do what we tell you to do to keep you alive. And it's like go, go, go. Now, when you get to aviation, it's nothing like that. It's a completely different spectrum. Aviation, we are chill, but our mindsets are different because we're more, like Jamie said, we're more technical. We're more about moving people on the battlefield. We're engaging with a lot of people. So it is, I'm not going to say it's more gentleman in aviation, but it's a more relaxed environment.
It's
If
just
you,
different. I had to tell that
yeah,
story a million times and in all these years, and I can't say that one or the other is harder. They're just it's in
different.
different ways. It's different ways.
Yeah.
I spent a lot more time in the field as an infantry guy,
Hmm.
uh, working on not much sleep for a long time, but I'll tell you that especially in the early years in aviation, I spent a lot of late hours in garrison. My first
Oh yeah.
aviation duty assignment was in Hawaii, which I know pre-war in Hawaii. I mean, it was great, but at the same
Hmm.
time, we had these old Alpha model Blackhawks in their big rust piles because they're out on an island in the middle of the ocean,
Yep.
and that salt water would just eat them up. So we go to
Eat
take
them
off
up.
a component, and everything underneath it was corroded, and you pull that off, and the stuff underneath it was corroded, and we, and of course, when you get to that type of job, if the aircraft aren't flying, then you're not mission ready. So it was pretty much like,
Correct.
oh, you're going to stay here until you can go home when the
Until we're
aircraft are
mission
fixed.
ready, especially
Right.
correct. And I was painting a picture on the first episode that aircraft, we're looking at a division asset right there. So we had to stay, we had to keep our aircraft maintained, and you know how it was. We'll get to that in a second, especially in theater, right? You had to keep your aircraft running. So there was a lot. When I said earlier, because I was a maintenance test pilot myself, like we had to make sure, like James just said, a lot of hours fixing aircraft. And it was just a part of the more technical, but everybody does their job in the Army, and the Army's gonna get their time out of you pretty much. You just got to figure out where they're gonna get that time out of you.
Right.
So when you re-enlisted to become a crew chief, did you realize you're going to stay in the Army for a long time? And if not, at what point did you realize, all right, I want to stay in the Army, I want to make a career out of this, and I'm gonna do this for a while?
Hey man, so that's a great question. So by this time, I had gotten married, and I had
Oh,
one
okay.
kid, the oldest. I had the oldest, and it wasn't 6 months after I got to Hawaii, which was my first aviation duty station, that
Mm-hmm.
my wife, who's now my ex-wife, had gotten pregnant with the second one, and so lots going on. I had a really hard transition,
Mm-hmm.
but like mentally and emotionally understanding what a lot of what you just talked about. How, not that aviation was better; it was just different.
It's
And I had
different.
been
It's the
so ingrained. You know, I think we tend to revert back to what we know, and
mm-hmm.
so having been in that scout platoon and 4 years in the infantry, there were some things that I knew like the back of my hand because we had to memorize all that stuff, and it was easy for me to spout off the Ranger Creed, and when I became a squad leader, to
Yeah.
make those soldiers do that kind of stuff, and PT them for punishment, if they were
Mm-hmm.
messed up. Um, but I struggled because I wasn't learning the technical aspect of it, not as much as I should have been.
Yeah.
And then I had thankfully, probably about a year into my first aviation assignment there, I had a platoon sergeant come in, and he kind of grabbed me by the scruff of the neck one day, and he's like, "Hey man, check it out. Like, you're really good at leadership stuff and making sure these soldiers are squared away, but if you don't learn aircraft maintenance, like you're not going to be any good to us. You're not going to get promoted.
Correct.
You're not doing any good for these soldiers on the technical side because you're not teaching them. They're not looking up to you for that reason." So I kind of had to recalibrate my mind a little bit and focus. And thankfully, I had a couple, that platoon sergeant and a couple other NCOs came in and really schooled me on the understanding of aircraft maintenance. I
Yeah.
had to humble myself and get out there. It wasn't long before I got promoted. Points were lower for those guys.
What was your
Um,
rank at the time?
so as I reclassed, I was a specialist E4,
Mhm.
and then within probably 6 months of getting to Hawaii, I, they sent me to the board right away, pen sergeant, not long after, and I had to go out there with young soldiers that were younger than me, less rank than I was, and realize that it's okay, which was hard for me, for those guys to know more than I did or to learn from them. And
Yeah.
once I figured that out, and they realized that I did, I had to show them that I did care about them because I was kind of rough around the collar there for the first year. You know, I hadn't got my
Yeah.
mind out of the infantry, and I was treating
Yeah.
people like that. And but it finally all kind of came to fruition, and I started to think to good NCO leadership that developed me and helped me understand how I could be successful in that type of environment.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's interesting that you say that, because same thing with me. I mean, NCOs, they are the backbone of the Army. And those, I tell everybody, I didn't have a lot of father figures in my life. And it's the NCOs in the Army that these men took me under their wing, and they raised me when I was a young soldier, and a lot of love, nurturing. They were tough, but you knew that they were tough from a place of love, and they genuinely cared about you and they wanted the best for you. But it was good that you had that in your life, right? You get there and these guys are showing
Absolutely.
you like, hey, this isn't the infantry anymore. You have to be a technical guy. You need to know your skill as a mechanic. If not, you're not going to get the respect and the credibility from other crew chiefs and aviators, and the list goes on. So there's demands physically and mentally in every job in the Army, and there's nothing easy about the Army. I mean, nothing. I don't. That goes from that's from being a cook to admin, payroll. I think everybody's job is very important in the military.
That's
And I'm
right.
not one of those soldiers that ever downplayed anybody's position, because I had a very huge team mentality. I knew, if you knew from a logistics standpoint, like cooks, supply, these guys, this is where we win the war, right? And these guys are very important. Their jobs are they're not just cooks. They're not just admin people. Everybody's important. So what was the time frame, year frame, and how long were you in the Army at this point when you started realizing, all right, I got to get my stuff together as a crew chief? What was the year? Have you been deployed? Any deployments? Because I know Kosovo may have been around that time frame. Anything to that nature?
So this is like 95, 96, when after my first year in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter was born in early 96. So now I got
Nice.
two kids. Um, lots of quick learning on maintenance stuff. Again, I was getting promoted. I think I went corporal and then sergeant, and then it wasn't probably another year after I graduated BNOT, which is what ALC used to be called,
Mm-hmm.
which again was back at Fort Eustis. I Penn Staff Sergeant, and then I loved it. I loved the job. I spent my entire time in Hawaii in maintenance, and then I would actually go on to spend the majority of my career in maintenance. My first time in a flight company was when you and I met, actually, as a first sergeant.
Really?
Uh, so I was no,
I
I
never
did, I
knew
was on
that.
flight status for a little bit. I did a lot of with the maintenance test
Mm-hmm.
pilots when I was in Delta Company and maintenance companies. I did a lot of test flights and stuff like that with those guys, but I was never a full blown crew chief. But
Damn.
and you asked me a little bit ago, like at what point did I realize I was going to make this a career? It's funny because I'm not sure, and I want to get into this later, but I'm not sure that I really had thought about it that much. I feel like for a lot of at
Mm,
least the first half of my career, maybe the first 10 years,
yeah.
like I was just going to work every day. Hey man, your ETS day is coming up. Time to reenlist. Okay. You solemnly swear? Yep. Let's do it again. Just got
Yeah.
PT in the morning, just keep doing it. And I mean, it was good.
Was that seamless reenlistment, was that due to the love of the Army, or just like you loved your job, or both?
So that's a great question. I think it was both of those things, but it was also I'm a young married father with two kids. My spouse at the
Yeah.
time didn't work, and uh, I mean nobody was getting rich in the army, but at the same time, the benefits were very good. I
Oh
lived
yeah.
living on the island of Oahu in Hawaii that people paid tons of money to come visit. In a
Mm-hmm.
nice set of government quarters. I lived up towards the North Shore, which is where they do all the big surfing championships and stuff for people that, if you haven't been to that part of the world. This is again, it's before the war, and we had the military has good benefits, right? So my family was taken care of essentially.
Yeah. I will agree with you on that. I'm gonna piggyback on that. The Army does take care of your family. I mean, I will stand on that to the day I die. The Army we're growing up. We're young men. We have no skills. They pay us to teach us a skill. They give us enough money to take care of your whole family. I mean, I get it. We're in the business of war, right? That's the biggest sacrifice we make, and that's the biggest risk. But I mean, the level of, now that I'm a civilian, I've been a civilian for 9 years. I tell everybody, Army life was easy life because all we did was focus on mission, right? That's all we focused on, and we're never alone. We always had a good group of, we always had people around us to go through the suck with us, right? And then we knew that the Army was going to take care of our family. Period. We had nothing to worry about. Home was going to be good.
Yeah, I like to say that the Army's simple. It's not always easy, but it's simple, right? Especially
Oh,
when you're a
yeah,
young soldier. I mean, all, if you do just do what you're told, right place, right time, right uniform, uh,
yeah,
you'll be successful, right? Until you get to a point where you got to start,
yep.
uh, thinking and making decisions and stuff like that, and then things change a little. But yeah, I mean, I agree that, and that was probably the biggest proponent, especially when I had kids and some of that stuff we were talking about a little while ago. Hey, I'm going to make sure that I provide for my family and
Oh,
my
yeah.
children. And uh, it was interesting though, because I found that the military also, and it's not just the military, it's just my experience. Because I think just about any job will do that way. But man, it'll set you up quick to be a workaholic, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
because especially once you start getting promoted
I was just gonna
and
say, there's always
realize that,
something. Yeah, there's all those incentives, man.
yeah, it gets a little not cutthroat like, we're not knifing and jabbing or anything, but like it's competitive to
It's
get
very
promoted
competitive.
at certain levels, and you're realizing, hey, I got to do more, and you get all this other responsibility, and suddenly, you go from, gosh, man, I went from a squad leader. I was in aviation. I was a sergeant. I think I had like 7, 8 young soldiers. Fast forward, a few years, you're a platoon sergeant, and depending on, I mean, if you're in a flight company, platoon sergeant, you get a handful, maybe 10, 12. If you want to include the pilots, people will argue different things about whether you're responsible for them or not. Um, but in some of
You
those,
were
like when I
responsible
was a
for
first
us.
sergeant,
You were
try to take
responsible
care,
for us. All the things.
try to take
Listen,
care of people.
you took good care of people. And that's one thing I love about you. You are a people person. You took care of people. And I saw how this first sergeant at a flight company was taking care of his warrant officers better than, this is my opinion now. A first sergeant was taking care of his warrant officers better than the O grades were, and I was just blown away by it. So you were very responsible for us because personnel, right? You had to manage the personnel. So
So that's one of my big, we talked about, we've already touched on some of the big points that I want to make sure that we address during the podcast, and one of them is people, the importance of people. And it took me a while to
mhm.
realize, to shift my mind from my mindset that I had growing up in the infantry of, you're going to do what I say because I'm in charge. That's just how I was raised in the army. And then, but once
Yep.
you realize, you start getting promoted, and it's not about getting promoted. It's about, you start getting more responsibility.
Oh
Things just
yeah.
happen to go together. And at some point, you start having responsibility for some folks that outrank you. I mean, straight up. When you and I met,
Mhm.
you outrank me, right? Even as a young warrant officer.
Yep.
That's the way the Army rank structure works. But
Yep.
thankfully, I had learned from probably some great NCO mentorship, like we talked about before. I had some great young officers too, by the way, uh,
Yeah.
and fantastic warrant officers. Um,
Appreciate that.
from my maintenance side all the way to the flight side, um, and then we'll talk more about the warlords, I think, later. But it didn't take me long to realize, hey man, if you need to get stuff done, then you just have to. It's about influence. It's not about
Yeah.
um, you know putting the hammer down and making people do stuff because I'm the first sergeant or
Mhm.
I'm whatever. No, man, you're not going to get that. People are just going to fight you on that. And in the end, it's
Correct.
not about them fighting you. It's more understanding how you can get the organization to be successful. So the
Correct.
power of people and taking care of people from an organizational standpoint, understanding that for leaders, that's huge. How you
Yep.
influence them. And oh, by the way, about that time, maybe 5 years before that, the world changed, and
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to
we
that.
from the tactical side to we just didn't treat generally we didn't treat people like we got
Mhm.
treated real young in the army.
Yeah.
Things changed, society changed, American public changed,
Yep.
and you weren't
And
allowed to
that's
curse
one thing
people
I
out
always
and
mention.
do a million push-ups and all that.
The Army is a reflection of our society, right? The military will change with society. That's one thing I've noticed with the amount of time I spent in. Another good thing about the military is the Army will make you grow up fast by giving you a lot of responsibility. It's crazy because it happens so fast. One day you're not, next day you got all these people, and we're talking about lives here. And what's attached to these lives, we got families, right? So it's a lot of people. It's just not you have 10 soldiers. No, you have 10 soldiers with 10 families, and however big are those families. So that one platoon sergeant, we're talking about maybe 1,000 people. That's the soldiers and the families and all the lives that he impacts. That's a significant amount of people. So you do grow up fast in the military. I mean, I was 25 years old flying helicopters. I see 25-year-olds now, and I'm like, man, I heckle them. I'm like, you know what I was doing at your age? I'm flying helicopters. But
That's another great thing about the military.
yeah,
Where else can you get so much responsibility as a young person?
it's. I look back at it, and it was very overwhelming back then. Very overwhelming. And even to this day, I mean, it's still overwhelming because you are responsible for. There's a lot going on. So I wanted to segue into our next topic. Where were you during 9/11? I want to know, like, duty station, your MOS, what was your rank? What was going on in Jamie's life at that time?
Okay, so I had extended twice in Hawaii. Back
Huh?
then, you could send your branch manager like a box of chocolate covered macadamia nuts, and you
What is
might
it
be able to get
called?
it.
What is it called when you extend in overseas?
So back then, they had a program. It was called OTEP, the Overseas Tour Extension and Incentive Program, OTEIP.
Okay.
There's some other things that you can do, COTS and IPCOTS and all that kind of stuff, where
Hmm.
consecutive overseas tours. I didn't do that. I just did 1 year extensions. I did that twice. So I did my 3 years
Okay.
for what they consider an overseas assignment, even though Hawaii is a
Yep.
state. It's outside the continental United States.
Hmm.
And then I extended 1 year, and then I
How long?
extended another.
How long were you there in Hawaii total?
So I did 5 years, 5 years in
5 years.
Hawaii,
Okay.
and they were about to kick me out. HRC and Branch was like, "Hey man, you can't stay in Hawaii for forever. It's time to go." So this is like 99
Hmm.
roughly, and so I had put a drill sergeant packet in, and I really
Mm.
wanted to be a drill sergeant. Back then, I was in really good shape. I did have a lot of that, that infantry background, but I hadn't had my mind opened a little bit, by these great aviation leaders to help me see the bigger picture. And I thought, you know what, I need to go, and I just want to do this. But I had so I'd got approved. The packet got approved. I was supposed to be going back to Fort Benning,
Hmm.
which is I've met a few aviators that went back to Fort Benning as drill sergeants, but back then it was almost unheard of.
Yeah.
And man, I was so excited. And at like 3 months before I PCS, I got a phone call, and they're like, "Hey, man, you're not going to be a drill sergeant." There was all that. For those that may remember, there was a bunch of stuff going on at some of the proving grounds where where some drill sergeants back
Mm,
then were messing with their soldiers and um,
yeah,
some relationship kind of stuff, and they got really, really strict
really
on
strict.
who they would take. And I
It-
got when I was in the infantry, I got like in a fight or something like that, and there was just something in my military record that
yeah.
they didn't
Jamie, if
want me
you
to do.
can, real quick,
Yeah,
what was the time frame that all happened? Because I vaguely remember that. Was that around 99 ish,
yeah. So
2000?
I believe it was late '90s.
Okay,
Uh,
because I remember I was going to basic at that time, and that was something they were very, very strict on. It was misbehavior of some people made bad choices. Not all drill sergeants are bad. I don't want anybody to think that.
no,
Some people they're amazing human beings actually, because the demand on their job is huge, and they're creating war fighters for the military, and that's such an important thing to our country that I need people to really understand. Like these, as a civilian, a young civilian, you show up to basic training, boot camp, wherever it is, and you got these people that invest their life to making you a soldier.
that's right.
And I say
They
when I
got
say
they
boot
got
camp,
nine
that's the
weeks to
Marines,
turn civilians
obviously.
into soldiers. Ready to go.
Hey, and they do it like they make the magic happen. I don't know, they got the magic sauce, but they make it happen, and they're very proficient. They're very good at their job. So shout out to all the drill sergeants out there,
That's right.
basic and AIT drill sergeants
I still remember
doing a good
mine.
job
Mostly
out there.
kind of
And
horror, uh, but they are. My wife was a drill sergeant. My current wife, a
yeah.
good one.
So finish that story about you didn't get selected, and it's because
Yeah, man. So I get the call.
something
They're like,
came up
"Nah,
in
you
your
can't
record.
go. We got this thing. You did this thing. You were involved in this alleged." We rolled up this kid that was talking smack when I was helping to run a pre-ranger program in the Rakasans a couple years before,
Hmm.
and we all got interviewed by CID, and somehow that was in some level of trust. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't get an
Hmm.
Article 15 or anything for it, but it was definitely when they did the background check, they're like, no, you ain't going. You ain't going to be no drill sergeant. Not with what we got going on right now. So they said, well,
I tell
they said,
people that the military and the government will find everything out about you.
oh yeah,
Everything.
oh yeah,
So how'd you
absolutely.
feel when you found out? How'd you feel when you found out that, all right, I'm not gonna be a drill sergeant? Were you
I was
upset,
heartbroken,
sad, or
man.
were you just like, all right, let's
I was heartbroken.
oh,
Like
that had to be tough.
I was so excited to go do that, and I was in really good shape. I was running marathons. I mean, it would have been a great match for me at that
Hmm.
time, um, physically and emotionally and mentally. But that's not what was meant to be.
Yeah.
So they said, "Well, where do you want to go?" I said, "Where do I want to go? Like, I want to go to the 82nd Airborne Division with jump school en route, which is what I
Still
tried to
trying to
do."
get jump school. I love
Yeah.
it.
I asked for airborne school in Hawaii, and they laughed. They're like, "You know how many miles it is to airborne school from here, dummy?" So,
So, Jamie, I want to ask real quick,
yeah.
how many years you been in the Army at this
By
time?
then, so about 8, 9 years. I joined in
8,
'91.
9 years. You have consistency. I love that about you. You're still trying to get to airborne school. You're not letting that slide. I love it.
I would get to jump out of a military aircraft, but not till I was a first sergeant. I'll tell you that story when we get there.
All right.
Yeah,
So
so
where'd they send you?
they said, "Where you want to go?" I said, "Hey, I want to go to Bragg, which is now Fort Liberty. I wanted to go to
Hmm.
82nd Airborne because I knew if I went there, then I would be able to be a paratrooper." And they're like, "Nope, we have no slots for that." So they're like, "You can go to Drum, which is like in the Arctic Circle in New York, for those that don't know, uh, or Fort Hood,
Cold as hell.
which which was kind of scary to me. I'm like, Fort Hood, I don't know. The bad stuff hadn't even come out about Fort Hood, but I'm like, nah, I don't think I want to go there. And they're like, or you can go back to Fort Campbell. And I'm like, send me back to Fort Campbell. Let's go. So I went
Fort
back there. This
Campbell.
is 2000. In the year 2000, I showed up to the 101st Aviation Brigade. Back then, there was 9 aviation battalions in the brigade. There was one aviation brigade in the 101st when the Army underwent transformation in 2004 that changed. They broke them into the two
Yeah.
brigades, 159th and the 101st.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yep.
but anyway,
And
so I
159th,
got to,
they're currently down in 159th left Campbell. Where are they located now? And
you know what? I don't even know.
what's that new? What's the? I'm drawing a blank right now. That duty station, yeah, in El Paso. What's the name of it?
Fort Bliss?
I thought they went to Fort Bliss.
No, that's, I mean, they got the cab here, the 1AD cab is here. I'm pretty
I don't
sure
know
Campbell
I
still
don't know
has
what
the
happened.
two cabs, but I don't know. I've been out of the game for a while, so I don't know.
Yeah, me too.
But
So don't no, no I don't want to put out any misleading information. I don't know.
yeah, right. Uh, but I showed up to 6th Battalion, man, which is the same battalion that I was in when I met you.
Yeah.
But this is like 8 years before that. You know, I show up as a brand
Mm,
new staff sergeant. Um, I'm buying a house, moving my family, and they assigned me to the as a aircraft inspector to the TI shop, and
mm,
I was not happy. I had just spent all these years doing all this leadership stuff. I was a squad leader. I was a
yep.
phase team leader in Hawaii. I had these great NCOs that taught me about how to do a phase, how to run a phase, and I was like, man, I do not want to go be an aircraft inspector because it was kind of bred into me. It's leadership. We want leadership positions, leadership, leadership,
Yep.
leadership. It's actually one of the best things that ever happened to me. Again, me thinking I know what I want, and what I would argue is probably God directing where I need to go.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
I learned so much as a technical inspector, but I show up there. I wasn't in that shop in 6th Battalion for a month, and they got a tasking. So the Lancers, you remember the Lancers from Bravo 5th Battalion?
Yep.
Their company got attached to Third ID and deployed to Bosnia,
Really.
but they rebutted the TI. So brigade punted it over to us, and I remember the sergeant major walking in the TI shop saying, "Hey, we need a volunteer for one of you guys to go to Bosnia." So by this time, it's 2000. I got almost 10 years in the Army. I've never done a real world deployment, you know.
Yep.
And before he even got finished telling what he needed, my hand was up. I'm like, Sergeant Major, I will go today. Like, I'll get on a plane right now if you want me to go to
Mhm.
Bosnia. And so I ended up going as an individual augmentee. Um, I actually got attached to Third ID. I did the travel with the Lancers, but they made me a TI as well. So obviously I was not part of a flight company. But man, I
Mm.
learned so much stuff. I got put with some great inspectors there that taught me all about historical records. And I
Mm.
mean, I had been to BNOC and I learned a lot of that stuff, but it's academic until you do it.
Yeah.
And dealing with all the tracking of the historical items, aircraft is maintenance is pretty important. I mean, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but when I graduated AIT, they made us sign our certificates in red ink, and they say in the ceremony that it represents signing in blood
Yeah.
because so many lives depend. And it's I know it's not lost on you as a pilot either. You know, so many lives depend on, and it's not just the crew, but the passengers and who knows who else could be collateral damage if there's some kind of incident.
Yeah. And
So,
just
but
so
I
the
had some.
audience knows, this is why historical data on aircraft maintenance is so important. One thing I learned from the wonderful warrant officers that, raised me through the ranks and taught me to be the great pilot I was when I retired is one told me this one profound thing. He said, "We do all our paperwork, Jason, in the event you do crash to make sure you have everything in order. That's why we make sure that everything is all our T's are crossed, our I's are dotted, and we focus on the attention because if something happens, they're coming after the pilots. That's just the bottom line. It's just the nature of the industry, right? So this is why it's so important to make sure that all the maintenance is done right. There's no shortcuts, none of that stuff. And if there is shortcuts, there are tactical shortcuts out there. But even then, we still have to make sure there's a standard to it and make sure the process is done right. We're just not putting bubble gum on shit and going to fly it. It's not going to really
Right.
hold that long. So that stuff is very important.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's a lot
Oh, go
different
ahead.
in vehicle maintenance. Where
Oh yeah.
something happens in a vehicle, you can just, for the most part, you can just pull over and figure out what's going
Hmm.
on. And obviously, in an aircraft, you can't just pull over on the side of the road. So for those that don't know, every single thing that you replace on an aircraft, it takes us another set of eyes to come in and look at every single step. Like if I pull a
Yep.
wheel off, there's a there's a cotter pin, there's a nut that holds the wheel on the axle, and then the wheel comes off, and you disassemble the wheel, and there's bearings inside there. And when all that stuff gets taken off, it's got to get clean and inspected, and
Hmm.
there's a manual that tells you whether it's still usable or if you have to replace it with all these different criteria. And then when you put it back in there, you got to have an inspector come and see, okay, I saw the bearing, or a test pilot, because they have that same type of authority typically,
Hmm.
right? Okay, I see the bearings are installed, they're lubricated correctly, the nut is put back on, and every single one of those things is, back in the day we were writing it down in the logbook, and now it's all, of course, it's computerized, but
Yeah, it's called
every
computerized
single
now.
thing is like, we're doing these phases. I mean, two months, month or two of maintenance, thousands of entries on these forms of, removed main landing gear wheel nut cotter pin, and then there's a column next to it, and when you put everything back together, you'd have to replaced cotter pin, and every
Hmm.
single one of those lines, there'd be like 50 lines of remove this, replaced it, reinstalled, torqued it. Oh, you torqued it? What'd you torque it to? Oh, this many
Yep.
inch pounds. Blah 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 blah. And there'd have to be an inspector to come and who checked all that, and they either sign off on it. Back in the day, we had a stamp on the
Yep.
paper, and
I
if it
remember
was
that
good,
too.
they check it, stamp it, stamp, initial off, and it was good. And man, I learned so much as an inspector. I learned so much doing that. My first day on the ground in Bosnia, in the TI shop, my boss was a high school to flight school maintenance test pilot,
Mm.
young guy. That's horrible. I can't even remember his name. I'll think of it. It's not his fault because he was a great American. He ended up giving his life in a shoot down in Iraq. But
Mm.
Mitch Carver was his name. But it's funny because he was younger than me. At the time, W-2, super smart though. He was a 58 Delta pilot because we were in a task force with Blackhawks and Kiowa
Mm.
Warriors.
Okay.
And he's like, hey, Hal, I want you to be on orders for the 58s as well. And I'm like, hey, sir, I've never even touched an aircraft other than a Blackhawk before. He's like, can you read a book? Well, yes, sir. Well, then you'll be good. Maintenance is
Yeah.
maintenance. Just,
Yeah. That's true.
but man, I was so scared, but I had so much fun. Just not just on the Kiowa Warriors, different mission, different aircraft. But it was
Yep.
neat because they had some different things. But also on the Blackhawks, and just new environment, new experiences, new people, new responsibilities, and I learned a lot, and I loved it. I'm
So,
very thankful for that time there.
so how was Bosnia as your first deployment? I mean, what was the experience like compared to your other deployments?
So I went late in the Balkans deployment cycle. Again, this is 2000. By the time I got there, there was green beans coffee already. You
Mm.
could go to the little shopette. I was on Camp Comanche, which was just down the road from Tuzla, Maine. For those who remember Tuzla, I didn't leave the camp too much. I did fly a little bit, again, a few test flights, but
Yeah.
most of my time was there on the base. And so it was interesting. I did interact with locals a little bit who were contractors on the camp. A couple times for holidays, I volunteered like to pull guard for some of the soldiers, so they could go eat Christmas chow or whatever. That was cool anyway because I got to stop and inspect, fuel tankers and stuff as they're coming
Yeah.
in. But I, but other than that, and a few test flights, I didn't get out around the country much. The boat we shipped our aircraft on a boat into Croatia, which at the
Mhm.
time I got to see Croatia like 20 years later, and it was absolutely beautiful. But when I first got there, it was not beautiful. A lot going on with the war and all
Yeah.
the stuff at that time. And then we flew from Croatia actually into Bosnia. And other than flying in, a couple test flights, and then flying out, I mean, most of my time was spent there on Camp Comanche.
Okay.
We were shorthanded anyway. Like I said,
Mhm.
I was having to do both aircraft types, so it was busy, but it was great. I loved it.
Yeah. So how long you were in Bosnia for?
So I did just under a year in Bosnia.
And then
Uh,
you went back to Fort Campbell afterwards?
yeah, so I was an individual augmentee, right? So they just sent me right back to 6th Battalion when my time was up. I got back. They uh, they made me the maintenance platoon sergeant in Delta Company,
You still at E6
and
at this time or you got promoted to E7?
so I was still a staff sergeant at the time,
Okay.
and
And this is
I guess
2001, right?
this is early 2001. That's
Early
right.
2001. Okay. So this rolls into what I was asking earlier. 9/11 happens. What's going on in Jamie's life at that time?
Yeah. So I got back from Bosnia. Um, my company commander met me. I guess him and the guy that was my commander forward in Bosnia knew each other. They were classmates or something. And he said, "Hey man, I heard good things about your stuff over there. I want to put you in charge of the maintenance platoon." He said, "We got some struggles with phases." I got down to the hangar floor. They got an aircraft alpha model that been in phase for, wait for it, a year. A year.
Oh,
It's like, whoa, well, a year. For people that don't know, it's an aircraft inspection that back then on that maintenance schedule that we were at usually would go for those older aircraft maybe 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. Tear it all down, inspect it, build it all back up, and send it back out. Uh, a year. That was a big deal. So the battalion commander was pulled me in like a week later and was like, "Hey, I need you to fix this." Yes, sir. I'll fix it.
now I
Give
wanna
me.
paint the picture for everybody. You're an E6. You're being asked by the battalion commander to fix this as an E6. So that says a lot about who you are as an individual. All right, because there's probably E7s and other people that could probably that should be doing it, but I've met a lot of squared away E6 maintainers that these guys are the difference between success and failure. And it sounds like you're one of those guys.
Hey, man. So I had the privilege, like I told you before, to learn from some outstanding people and
Yeah.
a lot of NCOs. At that time, a few warrant officers. Again, my exposure to them was mostly from a maintenance
Mm-hmm.
perspective back then, uh, and I just was given opportunity. Hey, okay, people are saying that you can do a pretty good job. We need you to come in here and fix this. So I did the best that I could. I think I had just under a year to get things going there. We did. I had I had some great help. Linda Carter. I don't know if you remember Linda. She was in the Warlords for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day when I was a platoon sergeant, she was one of my section sergeants as a young E5. She's retired first sergeant now, super squared away, um, and she helped me change that program.
Nice.
And right about the time we got it uh, doing much better, averaging 60-day phases for alpha models, under 30 days for Limas. They need. I got moved again. They put me in PC, which is
Mm.
production control, which is
Yep.
sort of like there'll be an NCO and a warrant officer that are responsible for managing aviation maintenance for the entire fleet, the battalion,
Mm-hmm.
right? For those that don't know, and So the first warrant officer I had in there, his name was Bob Butler. He's a good dude. He's a little crazy, but he was a good dude. I learned a lot from him to understanding managing at that level, the fleet level. I'd never worked anything above, platoon. Oh, I mean, I did work in quality control a little bit, like we talked about, but um, the scope of responsibility and the focus on that from higher was, and the pressure that you receive
Yeah.
was different. Lots of administrative stuff, reports. I met a whole new group of people through the brigade and the division, that were responsible for aircraft maintenance at those levels and reporting, and a lot of those folks were really smart, super smart. W4s, W5s at brigade, and some of their sergeant first classes and master sergeants that also invested in me to help me understand the bigger picture, and I appreciate that. And I spent a long time in that job, Jason. I spent almost 5 years in PC.
Wow.
Uh, so I'd only been there a few months, and then 9/11. To get
Mhm.
back to your question, 9/11 happened. Right.
Yep.
So I still remember it. It's a little crazy. The I had brought people in. Actually, I think I was still in maintenance. I was still in maintenance because I had brought it's within like a month or two, and I brought the soldiers in. There was some internal conflict going on in my platoon, almost like a little insurgency going on. And I'm like, all right, I gotta
Mhm.
I gotta get rid of this.
Yeah, mutiny.
So yeah, so I brought them all in real early one morning, like 4 in the morning or something like that. I gave them all the pep talk. I was probably a little loud, but I just need them to understand, like we're all one team, and stop people who are being
Yeah.
divisive. Stop trying to divide the team, and like we have a mission, and we got to do it together. And I think it was then either later that morning or it was the next day 9/11 happened. And I always used to
Mm.
give them soldiers try to understand, hey, if we go to war, you understand we got to need how we're going to have to depend on each other, and all of a sudden, boom, 9/11.
Yep.
Now, so I mean, we're talking a lot of work stuff at home. I mean, at home for me was a lot like I think at home for most Americans. A lot of unsureness about what's going on,
Mhm.
some fear. I'm worried about. I'm pretty sure that we're going to end up going somewhere.
Mhm.
Uh, but now I'm concerned what's going to happen with my kids, and
Yeah.
I just the last few years I've been giving my son the speech. Hey, we're gonna family's very important to me. I told you from the beginning with my grandfather and all these things. I want to be with my family. I just was gone for a year, and now uh, we didn't deploy right away. My 6th battalion didn't deploy right away. The Chinook guys, those poor Chinook guys, man, they were in Afghanistan quick. And then after they came back from their first tour in Afghanistan, I want to say like 90 to 120 days later, a bunch of them were in Iraq with us in the Iraq invasion. So
So
my heart really went out to those guys.
yeah, those Chinook guys, man. You want to talk movers of the battlefield? I've seen Chinooks do some things that even to this day are like that can't be real, man. But these guys, the way I've seen these guys move the battlefield in 08, 12, I mean, it was mainly in 08. It was unbelievable. Those Chinook pilots, man, I give you guys huge shout out to them Chinook guys because they've done some stuff that you and I to this day I can't believe it even happened, but
It's
they've
crazy.
made it happen. So let's talk about that. You go to Iraq. What year was that?
So that was 2003, the invasion.
2003. What was your rank at the time? Still E6?
So I was still a staff sergeant. I was still in PC. I got promoted to sergeant first class in Iraq, actually.
Okay. So what month did you? Man, I actually think that's crazy. Because what month did you guys get into Iraq in 2003?
So I'm pretty sure we were in Kuwait. I don't remember for sure. It's been a long time, and I
Yeah,
hit my head a lot in the army. But I think we were there in February, and then we crossed over. I always say it was. I thought it was March 19th. Every year on the
It was March.
news, I hear them say March 22nd or March 23rd. And I'm like, no man, we crossed on March 19th.
We said that earlier in the podcast that what the news said and what's really going on, there
That's
is
right.
always a huge
That's right.
disconnect. The crazy thing is,
Yeah, that was crazy.
I remember getting there in November 2003, and you guys are starting to wind it down and starting to leave. I think at that time, is that correct?
Yeah, so I remember you had the two ID combat patch, right? The
Correct.
from the strikers, if I remember right.
Yep, Stryker Brigade. We were the first. We essentially were the test bed for the Army, and the whole modular concept of the Army was two
Right.
ID, Second Brigade, Second Brigade. Yeah, it was Second Brigade, and we drove from Udari all the way up to Mosul and Strikers, and the whole brigade went together. And I think that's what. Once again, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge and my experience, this was the first time we tried this modular concept. And once we were successful with it, I'm pretty sure the Army went to that and still does it to this day, because the Army realized that you could be more effective moving as a brigade instead of a division. Because if you don't know, moving a division, oof, that is a lot of people. That is a lot of money. That is a lot of time. So I was a part of that. And I know when we showed up, we saw a lot of 101st guys there, and that was going on.
Yeah, man. So we did it. We crossed March 19th. I was part of, they call it the GAC, the Ground Assault Convoy,
Mm-hmm.
and I got pictures of it somewhere. If I can find one, I'll send it to you so you can maybe
Okay.
flash it up on the podcast or whatever. But
Yeah, that'd be great.
um, at the time, our future battalion commander for the next Iraq deployment, at the time, he was Brigade XO, Mike Miller, who I still stay in contact with, super good dude. Former enlisted guy, warrant officer in
Mm-hmm.
the regiment, and then would become our battalion commander for OIF 4, I think it was, 0506 when we were in Spiker. But anyway, he led that ground assault convoy. And man, I'll just never forget. I'd never seen so many military vehicles in my life in the middle of the desert. And we just pointed north. I remember like the Brits went this way. They have maps and stuff. You can Google and find one and see. The
Mm-hmm.
Brits went like this way, and we just tore off through like the desert for a while. And it was crazy. It was some Wild West. I'm kind of scared, but at the same time, like it's exciting. And
Mm-hmm.
it's you see, it was. I remember in the beginning seeing a lot of us and Third ID, right? So the Third ID, which was mechanized infantry division, they also had
Yep.
armor, some armor and stuff too. And it's really funny to or interesting to know that from my experience, and then fast forward 20 years when I was an instructor at the Sergeant Major's Academy. I was teaching in the Department of Operations, and a lot of the stuff that we would teach was from um, Third ID and their drive up and to chop the head off the dragon and shock and
Yeah, I
awe and
remember
all
that.
this.
Mhm.
But it was funny to like teach the lark like you're talking about division level, theater level kind of stuff, plans and operations. But simultaneously, I'm thinking back to when I was a staff sergeant, on the ground assault convoy,
Yeah.
on the ground, going through all the craziness, vehicles on fire, Apaches blown up, everything from here to Missoula, and you thought that was cool, and then like the Air Force would start dropping JDAMs, and man, the first time we had a JDAM hit, I about peed myself. I'm like,
It's
you might have
very
to edit that out. Like, it is no joke. Like
it's
the
serious
first time
business.
you experience a large bomb exploding somewhat within your vicinity, you'll think about what the enemy goes through when we
Exactly.
rain the power down on them, and it put me to my knees. Like
Hmm.
I was like, wow, the
It's
shock just shook
yeah.
like the earth. It was crazy.
So
And
Iraq, your first. Well, that was your technically your second deployment, right? How did you feel going to Iraq, knowing that you guys are the tip of the spear, going into to begin this invasion? How did you feel personally about that? Did you feel you were ready? Did you feel the army gave you enough training?
oh man, I was so I was ready. I was so again, I'm still physically, I'm in some of the best shape of my life.
Okay.
Um, I was thankful at that time to have all the tactical experience that I had from my infantry days to some of the tactical experience that I had gained as a young enlisted aviator. From because the tactics are different when you know I'm an 11 Bravo where I'm responsible for not much more than my rifle and my rucksack, my backpack. It's got all my
Yep.
stuff in it. To boom aviation, and we got 100 trucks. My I'm driving a Hemet that's like a flatbed carrying 30 feet long cans of rotor blades that go on Blackhawks. And there's a trailer attached to it that's another 30 feet long, and it's carrying containers of thousands of parts, aircraft part nuts and bolts and different things for the aircraft,
Damn.
and or trucks full of troops and all these things, and how you're having to maneuver them across the battlefield. And it was technology back then. I think we had like Gen 1 Blue Force Tracker back then, BFT, right? And
Oh yeah, that shit
so we're
was not good.
we're on like our third leg of moving north, right? And we're supposed to go. We're supposed to bypass Baghdad. Third ID's already hitting Baghdad International Airport, and plus I think the Rakkasans were going up in there as well. I know they were because we had to send some people to help move them there. Um, but I'll never forget. We're doing this ground convoy. We're supposed to skirt Baghdad because you probably don't want your aviation maintenance unit, driving through the middle of Baghdad. That's not even completely secure yet. But again, we're on like Gen
Correct.
1 BFT. So it's got like a 10-minute lag or something like that. Of course, we make this wrong turn. Uh, and we had like the battalion S3s up there screaming, "Oh, let's turn it around." I'm like, hey, sir, check it out. I got 100-foot truck and trailer back here. We're not just turning it around, like, and all of a sudden we got all these huge vehicles. We're like downtown Baghdad, the airport's on the right of us, and there's huge crowds of people. And all of a sudden I'm starting to feel like this is a bad scene out of Black Hawk Down. I'm like, this
Yeah.
this is not good. Like the people are encroaching in on us, and
Hmm.
it got a little hairy there for a little bit. And I'm thinking, I hope the
Dang.
sheet metal
So
guy that's up there on the 50 cal is not going to chop these civilians in half with his machine
yeah,
gun.
that's crazy. So you guys get out of that situation. Where are you guys headed to Missoula?
So we split. Half the brigade was up in Missoula. The Chinooks were up in Missoula. The division headquarters ended up in Missoula. Petraeus and his guys were up there. 6th Battalion was generally at Q West, KRO West. It was just about an hour
Hmm.
south of there, on another airfield that had been destroyed by the Air Force. Uh, yeah, it was kind of crazy. But,
What was your most memorable moment in Iraq that time?
so a couple of them. The first one is the J Dam. That's all I always think of. The first time I really felt a bomb and explode pretty close. Uh, Probably the first time we took indirect fire there on the fob that we lived on.
Hmm.
I mean, we would obviously we would see it a million times over the next decade, but
Yeah.
I mean, people were like running out to go check it out like it was cool, and the rockets hadn't even stopped coming in yet. Um, I, I mean, there's a lot of little action things. There's a lot of you hear the story, but we thought we were only going to be there like 6 months, and then we ended
Yeah, I
up
remember that.
being there for a full year. I didn't get to take R&R leave on my first deployment because we didn't program it right for a year, and once we figured that out, there
Let me
just
add
wasn't enough
something real
time.
quick. Let me add some, Jamie, let me add something to that too. I just want to paint a picture for the audience. We're talking about a time where we didn't have internet. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of this stuff. I remember very vividly when I got to Iraq in 2003, I didn't talk to my family for at least 6 weeks. And when I had an opportunity to talk to them was on a old school landline that when you said hello, it had about a 60-second delay on it.
Right.
So, and we
Hello, what?
that's exactly how it sounded. And on top of that, we had access to pay phones, but they were only at certain spots, and you had to have AT&T car calling cards. It
Yeah.
wasn't a simple operation. It's nothing what it is compared to today. Uh, Jamie, I know you can relate to this. We went weeks, if not months, without showers, right? Because once again, this stuff wasn't there. We pretty much were just building things as we got there. So the struggle was real, and I don't say that to say ours was harder, any of that, but I think when we get to Afghanistan 2011, 12, 08, and we have these luxuries that's really they're luxuries in a combat zone, right?
Right.
On a major fob, but I think we took that for granted sometimes.
So I agree. We did have, there was a couple, like, I think we had an internet cafe, what they called it, that was set up on the fob later on in
Yeah,
the
I remember that.
deployment.
Yeah.
You had to like make an appointment or take a number or something
Mhm.
and come in there. And it was interesting, man. I want to kind of use that to bridge into another part of my life. Like, and I haven't really mentioned it much yet, but I had a really rough marriage in my first marriage. And
Mm.
I was married for 26 years.
Man.
And from 1994 to 2020. And there was a lot of, it's so crazy. I talked about a lot of the challenges and the struggles that I had with my stepfather, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, except for it wasn't about the alcohol and drug piece, but the screaming, the emotional, verbal, and sometimes physical abuse that
Hmm.
I experienced in that relationship was very challenging.
Hmm.
And I mean, I had a million discussions on it over the years of why didn't I just leave, or no one should. We know that no one should have to experience or put up with, if you will, that kind of abuse. Period. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I'd ask you to think about is, I'd made this promise to my children, and I'm
Correct.
trying to, I'm a I'm a believer in God, and I was involved in the church and all that, in the Christian church, and I struggled in my mind with the concept. I know that divorce, and from my beliefs, divorce is not the right thing to do. I sure as heck wasn't going to leave my kids. That was the number one thing. I
Yeah.
promised myself I would never let another man raise my children.
Let's go.
If I was still alive, I would
Yeah.
not let that
Yeah.
happen. And so maybe I was justifying it. I don't know, but for a lot of those reasons, I stayed um, for all
And
those years. So
Jamie, let me say something real quick. Some things in life don't need justification. We as men, we do things for the betterment of other people, especially our children. I tell people this all the time. You want to see a man's true love? Watch how he loves his kids. And I get it. There's bad dads out there. There's bad moms. There's bad people, right? But I'm talking about men that truly love their children, that would stay in a relationship for 26 years that's abusive physically, mentally, just to make sure that he has that opportunity to raise his children, right? There's no justifying. You don't have to justify anything. God has given you that. That's in your DNA, in your fabric, to make sure that I'm that man that wants to be around his children. And I see it time and time again. And I'm not saying anything nefariously with marriage or women or anything to that nature, but I'm saying is men will tolerate a lot to be present in their children's life. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, or they take it for granted.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, man. And so how does that fit in? We didn't have the connectivity then that we do now,
You're right.
and the opportunities that I had, especially in that deployment, were I don't want to say few and far between, but it wasn't like you said, you definitely couldn't get on there every day or even every week, and it kind of depends on your environment that you were in. I mean, we did have some mobile tactical internet capability, um, and then of course it didn't take very long for through contracts and stuff like that. Once we were settled for Iraqi companies to start working internet contracts that soldiers could pay for and stuff like that. Um, my point is though is that I struggled. There was a part of me that struggled. My kids were still fairly young at this point. My son was probably 11 or so. My daughter was 6, and so I knew that if I get on the video chat, which was a million times worse
Mm-hmm.
quality than what we have right here today, that the majority of my time was not going to be spent talking to them. I mean, I would be able to see them. I'd be able to hear their voice. Hopefully, they could hear mine, reassure them that Daddy's okay, and reassure me that they're okay. But at the same time, like there was a part of me that didn't want to go and get on there because of
Mm,
the person I would have to deal with on the other side.
yeah.
And that could be hard to talk about. And I struggle with that a couple times. I made myself go make these video calls, or maybe if there was a sat phone or whatever, I could pick up a sat phone with a card and talk to them for a few minutes, knowing that I didn't really want to listen. The majority of the conversation was going to be probably me getting yelled at or whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway,
How I need to know though, how did you, being in a combat zone, dealing with the high pressures there, knowing that the only place that you should seek comfort and get comfort, you're not getting it. How did you deal with that in such a, because that's a complex situation right there. How did you deal with that being in a combat zone, knowing that you can't call home without getting the case of the shit, just a lack of terms? But how did you deal with that during that time? Because there may be a soldier or somebody out there dealing with that. And I just want you to share with them to give them some insight, maybe some light on how they can deal with it.
so that's a great question, and I saw it there, and I would end up now when I look back retrospectively, I would see it throughout my career and throughout my life. And it's really for me, it was faith based,
Mm,
and tied to that trusting in God's provision, and His will for His people, for my family. Um, he didn't promise that everything would be all roses and rainbows, but he did say that we don't have to go through it alone.
yeah.
So although I may have felt lonely because my relationship sucked, um, I did not feel like I was alone. because my faith was strong in that. And then I had, um, as you know, when you're deployed, you've got your brothers and sisters that are there with you. You know, they're experiencing a
Yep.
lot of the same things, maybe not exactly the same, but you're holding each other up. There's an old Vietnam movie, I think it was Platoon, and one of the actors said, you know, hey Johnny, he didn't die for God, country, and the 101st Airborne Division. He died for his buddy that he was fighting right beside. You know,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of truth in that. Like we talked
Oh.
about earlier with the power of relationships,
Mm-hmm.
people, and that can be. It is often that way in the military, but it can be that way anywhere in
Yeah.
the world. Um, so a combination of just people holding me up, my faith, trusting in that, and my drive, my personal drive to not let any of that stuff, you know, take me down a road that I didn't want to go down. Whether
Yeah.
that's, and that
Yeah.
unfortunately, you know, a lot of our um, brothers and sisters have gone down depression and suicide and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And um, thankfully, I didn't have to. Uh, I definitely won't say I didn't deal with the depression because I know I did. I still do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Diagnosed. Like
Mm-hmm.
I believe that every single one of us have PTSD at some level, depression, probably some anxiety, whatever. I'm not trying to punk people out or anything
Definitely.
like that. That's not my intent. But you can't go through a lot of the things that we go through, first responders go through, or sometimes it doesn't even have to be combat related or trauma. Sometimes it's just life, you know, and
Yeah.
life can be really challenging, like we all know. And
Yeah.
resilience is you know the result of my faith, the result of my buddies being there for me, the result of me refusing to quit on me and refusing to quit on my children
Yeah.
builds in us. I know it built in me. I don't want to speak for other people, but I have seen it in other people's lives where it builds resilience. And that's another
Mm-hmm.
one of the big things that I want to talk about during the podcast is, you know, we experience these challenges, but just are we gonna get hit with stuff? We're gonna get hit with stuff. Everybody who's listening to this
Oh,
right now knows that,
definitely.
right? It's real. It's
Yep.
life. Um,
Yep.
but the thing is, what are you gonna do about it, right? You get knocked down. We
Correct.
all get knocked down, but you got to get back up. And oh, by the way,
Gotta get back up.
you got to reach out and help your brother or help your sister get back up because
Yep.
it may not be your time to be in the darkness, but if they are, because they can't see clearly when they're in the darkness. I've been there too.
Correct.
And people
I've been there.
help pull me out, you know.
Yeah.
So that
And
resilience, whatever that looks like, you know, I'm not trying to. For me, my faith was a huge part of that in my entire life. Um,
yeah.
what I'm saying is, whatever that is for you, it use it, leverage it
Yeah. Leverage.
to
Yep.
to make you um, so that you can. I know it's kind of cliche, but that you can bounce back no matter
Mm-hmm.
what happens. You're gonna get knocked down, but you got to get up again.
Yep.
And
So pretty sure it's Rocky. Doesn't matter how
it's that
hard
one
you get
too.
hit.
That's right.
But
Man,
all right, Jamie.
that's a great.
So how many other deployments have you had besides the initial invasion?
So we did a year there, uh, redeployed in 2004, underwent transformation. I would end up doing three more deployments after that with the same battalion.
So
The
you did
Army
all your
transformed.
you did all your deployments with 6th Battalion.
I did.
Now
I
that
spent
ladies
I spent 13 years in that battalion straight.
l- ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you something. That is what Jamie just said is very hard. Unless you're in the special operations community where you're assigned to one place, like the special operations community, they got hubs where they go and they pretty much stay there majority of their time, depending on what's going on. But in regular conventional army, for you to get deployed that many times with the same unit, that's very hard. Very, very hard. So I want to ask you, what out of all those deployments, which one is the one that stands out to you the most? The most complicated, most rewarding, saddest, whatever spin you want to take on it, or take on or look at it. Which one was the most memorable to you? And I know they're all memorable because they're all, different
Right.
things go on
Right.
different times. But for me,
So the first
example,
one,
2008 was like
yeah,
very memorable. So
yeah. So I would say the same. Oh 03, I mean, it was like the Wild West,
yeah, I
the
agree.
invasion, uh, exciting, kind of crazy. Um, it's new for most of us. But my next deployment, 05, 06, back to Iraq. We spent another year. We went home for a year, transformed, spent 2, 3 months in JRTC and training up and all those
Hmm.
things. They say, "Oh, you're home for a year." No, you're not really home for a year.
Yeah, you're not.
And then you go again. And I was still in PC at that time for 2 deployments, and I got matched up with a genius of a man named Brent Mellon, warrant officer, Black Hawk
I
maintenance
know
test
Brent.
pilot.
Shout out to Brent.
He's I think he's retired now, CW5. I
Hmm.
freaking love that dude. He taught me so much about the bigger picture of maintenance. Now, by this time, I'm having to spell Chinook and understand some of their maintenance stuff and challenges. And let me tell you, it's a lot different than Blackhawks.
Hmm.
Uh, and division, thinking that we still had 40 Chinooks, but because of transformation, we didn't. We only had 12. It was crazy, man. That battalion was crazy. That's the first time despite our warnings, uh, we flew 8 of 12 Chinooks into phase at the exact same time.
Wow.
Now, they did it on purpose, and the commanding general accepted this risk. I would go on to learn
Yeah.
uh, because we ripped we did a relief in place for every infantry soldier in Iraq, that deployment with the Chinooks. So flying people in, flying people out
Yeah.
over this period, a couple months when we first got there. And we basically flew 75% of our fleet of Chinooks into this phase maintenance, which they're all down for a month or two, getting torn apart and inspected. And these are, I'm right back having Hawaii flashbacks because these are the old D model Chinooks.
Hmm.
Half of them were probably C models in Vietnam, B models and C models in Vietnam, and just had been run through,
Yeah.
upgraded, and sent back in. And man, they were beat up. And plus, like I said, those guys had just come from Afghanistan. 90 days later, they're in Iraq, and then boom, back in Iraq again. And it was crazy.
With that being,
But it was. Go ahead.
I know I asked another question about hold that thought about your most
Okay.
memorable deployment. All right. But I want you to take a minute, take about 60 seconds, and let the audience know the level of commitment from these aviators, crew chiefs, these flight medics, the level of commitment that you've seen with your 30 years experience, that when it comes to the mission, especially in combat, we are willing to push that threshold and that envelope of safety, our own safety, and we will do pretty much whatever it takes to, number one, bring people home. Number two, just to support our brothers and sisters in arms. And well, if you could just talk about that
I
level of
will.
commitment.
There's a couple examples that come to mind when you say that, and what I want to share is really for the ground folks, for the non-aviators, but you are still military to understand, or at least glimpse into this piece of it. So
Mhm.
two things that really strike my memories. One was when you and I were deployed together in Afghanistan up in RC East in 08, 09. We were doing a pretty large deliberate operation that involved multiple aircraft, conventional forces, and special operations forces. We had one of our line companies. It wasn't the Warlords. It was Charlie Fifth Bat. They took a RPG to the, I think, the number two engine, the right hand engine, and the pilot was trying to fly it out single engine and just lost the power to do it at elevation that we were at in Afghanistan. Single engine in a Black Hawk can be challenging.
Very
Uh,
challenging.
physics is a thing,
Hmm.
uh, and man, it was something out of a movie. So he like they got a number two engine on fire because it's been hit by an RPG.
Yeah.
They land it. I don't know if you remember this guy. I can't remember his name, but he was a former Marine, Kim Kim pilot. He was I think he
Things
was
that
IP, whatever.
I think
Anyway,
his name was
he
Harris.
yes, you're right, Harris.
Yeah, I remember that
They
story.
try to single engine it out. They however far they made it, another 100 yards or whatever. They just didn't have enough power, so they had to put it back down. Dude, like jumps out of the cockpit with his M4, and he's like, this is all in a huge insertion. He's
Hmm.
like dropping people with his M4, bad guys with his M4. Meanwhile, the transmission on the aircraft had come down and like squished the crew chief. He was messed up. Uh, they have enemy that's approaching towards them. Lots of crazy stuff going on. I was in and out of the Tactical Operations Center, when all that stuff was going down. And all of a sudden, this guy, what was his name? Miriam, Chinook pilot, Mr. Miriam,
I remember him.
warrant officer, M Bravo Company. It's so funny, man. He was a crazy dude. He was like one of the worst soldiers, but he was an amazing pilot and he was a good dude. Like his hair was way out of regulation and he didn't do all the things that Army stuff that people wanted him to do, but he was a pretty good
Yeah,
pilot. And,
I
and
remember
for
Miriam.
whatever,
Rob
he gets
Merriam, tall
word.
dude.
Yeah, Rob Marion.
I remember
So he
Rob
gets
Merriam, man.
like he's in orbit. They're flying, they're doing insertions too, and he sees what's going on, and he like makes the call. They've gotten rid of their load of packs, and he comes down and like slams his Chinook down in between that aircraft and the bad guys. And it's Army helicopters are made out of like aluminum that's like a little bit thicker than a piece of paper.
Correct.
It's not like it's steel plated or whatever. And somehow they got those guys, they got those guys out of the Blackhawk and got them in the Chinook, and a couple other guys that were on the ground or whatever. And they're taking bullet holes into the Chinook, and finally they get them out of there. And later on, a couple of those guys received some pretty high level awards. The Silver
Hmm.
Star, I think,
Yeah.
Harris got, and which was a combined ceremony with his dad, who also received a Silver Star at the same time from his actions in Vietnam or something. That was crazy. I almost cried for
Crazy.
real. But to see what, to your point, the sacrifice that people will do for their brothers and sisters. So that was for another air crew. But then I flash forward another 2 years to Kandahar, my last deployment back in Afghanistan, same battalion, back in Kandahar, and Second Brigade of the 101st is just, I mean, they're getting hammered because General Petraeus said, "Hey, we are gonna sweep the Kandahar province." So it's Kandahar Surge. We're going through those guys. Their tour duty actually got cut short because they took so many casualties. I mean, it was tactically and strategically critical what they did,
Hmm.
um, sweeping through that entire province, but they took a lot of casualties. And we provided a lot of air support. We provided, it's what we do. We provided tactical transport. We're projecting combat power.
Hmm.
We're air support with the Apaches, calling in UAVs and fixed wing, helping them. We're doing medevac. Unfortunately, as you probably remember, we did all kinds of medevac chase, and and I'll never forget when we got back to Fort Campbell after that deployment. the brigade commander from Strike came to the headquarters, and I was a first sergeant at that time, so I just happened to be in the headquarters, the battalion headquarters, when this colonel, '06 colonel infantry guy comes from Second Brigade, and he brought this huge Strike Second Brigade. Their symbol was a heart, right? The black
Yep.
hearts they had on the side of their helmet,
Hmm.
and he had this big plate steel one, and we ended up putting it on a stand in the headquarters, and it said he personally wrote on it something like, "We'll never forget that every single time that we called, you guys were there. If whether it was we needed air support, whether it was guys are shot up, it didn't matter what the situation was." And it reminded me of some old Vietnam movies that I watched growing up, where hey man, it's a hot LZ, and some people are like, oh well, it's because they're high levels of management it's all about risk assessment and risk aversion, and are we going to risk the lives of two air crews to pull out a couple wounded soldiers on the ground? But what I love is that those pilots, those air crews, every time would say, no, we're going in. We're going in. And we did that. I say we, it wasn't me. It was guys like you. It was crew chiefs, men and women, crew chiefs, pilots,
Hmm.
door gunners, flight medics going in there, no matter what, no matter how bad it was, RPGs,
Yep.
machine gun fire, whatever. They're going in to get those guys on the ground and get them out or get them what they need to complete the mission. And it was I would leverage that. By that deployment, I was no longer in the flight company in the Warlords where you and I served together, but I was in the maintenance company, and I would talk to those guys. In the maintenance company, we were running 24/7 ops, 365. I'm
Yeah.
running two overlapping 14-hour shifts for a year, and at shift change, I try to talk to them maybe not every day, at least 3 to 5 times a week. I would try to catch them at shift change and
Hmm.
talk to all of them, and just reiterate, like you had mentioned earlier in this podcast about how the importance of the cook and the supply guy. Hey, we can talk all
Yep.
that smack we want about machine gunners and whatever, but guess what? If the machine gunner doesn't eat for 3 or 4 days, he's going to be combat ineffective, right? If you can't
Correct.
supply the logistics,
Correct.
the ammunition, how good is an Apache if it doesn't have any fuel or ammo? It's
Correct.
not, right? You got to have all that stuff. And I would try to reiterate,
Need it all.
it's not like I was some genius that came up with that. And like that's stuff that had been proven through centuries of warfare. But the point is, I tried to help my soldiers, who their mission was to be in that hangar every day, 14 hours a
Hmm.
day, in the heat, in the cold, making sure those aircraft were ready to get back up the next day. And I wanted them to understand the importance of what their scarred, bloody knuckles were from messing with those flight controls or shooting those rivets or tearing those engines apart or whatever, or spending hours getting supplies or parts or whatever. What it really meant to keep the aircraft flying, to keep our air crews trained, so that so that they could be there in support of the mission. And I heard a really smart general say one time, your proximity to the objective does not necessarily correlate to your importance to the mission.
Mm.
And,
Let's
and I
go.
try to I try to share that with my soldiers, to understand it. Like the stuff that's happening on the front lines, when it comes to aircraft, it doesn't happen without you. You know,
Correct.
and I'm not saying maintainers are better than anybody. That's not what I'm saying. I want them to understand it's about ownership, so that they feel I'm important. You ever heard the story about was it JFK? JFK did his first tour of like NASA, and they're giving him a tour, and they opened some hallway or whatever and walked in it, and you know who they walked up on? They walked up on the janitor. And of course, I'm sure like all the NASA people are like, oh, great. We're trying to tour the president here. And we walk into the janitor. And President Kennedy said, hey, come here, sir. Tell us, what do you do here? And he's got his little mop or whatever. He said, I help put people into space, sir.
Mm.
And I was like, that's pretty powerful because that tells me that the culture of that organization makes everybody in it feel like they're important
Yep.
to the mission, you know. And I just wanted my soldiers to understand that. It wasn't about me, it wasn't about them, it was about the team, our team within that company, our team within that our battalion that provided in the brigade that provided those aerial assets, and then the division and bigger than the division, whoever else we supported, the Marines, whoever else we were supporting there, in that entire portion of Afghanistan. And that
And that
has
was,
huge ties, military, non-military.
yeah,
If you lead a football team, if you lead whatever, or if you're a team member at IBM, is IBM still a company? Whatever.
yeah, it is.
Like,
I think it is.
you know, like,
I think you hit something very important, man. And now that I'm a leader in the civilian sector, and I even got emotional when you're talking about it. I've never met one pilot. In 2011 and 12, we even encountered that. Well, 2012, yeah, 2012, 13. Sorry, 2012, 13. We even encountered that it's gonna take it's gonna take a lot for an aviator, a pilot in command, to say no. We're not going in there to go help these guys. Like no matter what's going on. And I know I'm speaking from my experience because there was this. You remember the situation out on Route One where we pulled the soldiers off the highway and we didn't have approval from battalion,
yeah,
but we had to make that decision on the fly. It always boils down to one thing: if I leave that young kid out there, that soldier, am I going to be able to live with myself later on? Because that's what it boils down to, right? I have to live with that decision. And I've never met an aviator, a crew chief, a medic that would turn that opportunity down just because they feel like they're going to get in trouble or reprimanded. And I'm not saying we lived out there like the Wild Wild West, but when it comes to saving American lives, I mean, we will push the envelope. I'm willing to take an ass chewing most of the
yeah,
time. And I just want that's what I want the audience to know, that you have people out there when it comes to the Army, Marines, whatever, Americans, there is no level to what we're willing to sacrifice to help other people. I mean, and that translates to the civilian world, right? You
it
meet
does.
people
When
out
we
here.
say we don't teach them, I'll never leave a fallen comrade just because it sounds like something cool to say. Like, no, man, you're gonna be there. You got to be there for your buddy because if not, who's gonna be there for you?
Correct, correct. And I'm telling you right now, and I've I know from experience, an empty feeling is when, number one, you don't hear the helicopters anymore, and then you realize, shit, we're on our own here because the
Yeah,
only people that were gonna help us now have left. That is an empty feeling inside. And that's one thing that, I mean, I never wanted to be that pilot that would just leave people out there. So I never did it. And I know a lot of other people. I know a lot of great Americans and great crew chiefs. I tell people my heroes to this day are flight medics. I mean, what I've seen these individuals do, especially in 2011 and 12. I'm sorry, I keep getting my days mixed up. I'm getting old too. I just want the audience to know this. We're talking a long time ago. But 2012, 13 deployment, what I've seen these guys, these young ladies, these young men do, I mean, I'm the pilot and I'm dropping these guys off and I'm just sitting there in awe, like, God, this needs to be a movie on how like courageous these people are. All right, Jamie. So there's two questions I want to ask you related to all your combat experience. You have 5 deployments, like I stated earlier, 5 of them with the same unit, which is crazy outside of a special operations community. But the first thing is, what is your most memorable moment out of those 5 deployments? Good, bad, sad, whatever it is to you. Remember, this is your story. Be as honest as possible. And the second one is, out of all that combat time, what is your biggest takeaway from dealing with, the emotional highs, the emotional lows, losing friends, trauma? Like, we see a lot of shit in combat, especially as aviators. I tell everybody, we are a combat arms job. We are in the thick of shit. We got a lot going on. So, memorable moment, biggest takeaway.
So I got a couple memorable moments I got to share.
Okay.
One of them will be in from Kandahar, my last deployment, when we had a crash, and you remember Josh Powell,
Yep.
who was one of our crew chiefs, one of our warlord crew chiefs from previous deployments and previous time. He's super squared away kid, so he went on to be
Yeah.
the battalion stabilization instructor, uh, who was responsible for the training of all the enlisted crew members in the battalion. Good kid. I met him when he was a private on our second Iraq deployment. He was in the five. He was in the medevac.
Yeah.
But one of my two biggest memories will be the day of that crash. He was evaluating the crew chiefs on that mission, and it was a special mission. We had an entire set of passengers of Navy SEALs and Navy Special Warfare folks, and it was just a rough mission, man. They had to land in a dark mountaintop, lots of brownout conditions with the sand flying up
Mm-hmm.
middle of the night. Josh himself, even though he wasn't a crew member, had called a couple go arounds, from what I had learned later in the safety center review. Probably saving their lives, at least extending their lives for another few minutes. Go around, for people that don't know, is somebody in the crew's not comfortable with what's
Mm-hmm.
going on with the landing, so they'll call go around, and the pilots will then direct the aircraft for another go around, if you will, and try it again.
And real quick,
But
Jamie, let me just
yeah,
add to that. Uh, Crew mix, as long as you have a great, well, it's standard in aviation. Anytime a crew member does announce a go around, it's it's happening. That's it. We don't question each other because we all see different spots of the aircraft. There's some things I don't see. So for a go around to be called at least several times, you're in a tough situation already. All right. Sometimes we do get we do we do push things, but that's how serious. I just want the audience to know how serious a go around is. That's not some like we're chilling and shit's going good. If we're calling go arounds, especially on a real world mission on an infill, like to get operators on the ground, that's some serious shit.
exactly. And so you couldn't have more people on this aircraft. So again, we talked about this. So the entire crew's on there. Uh, Josh Powell, who was a staff sergeant at the time, battalion standardization instructor, he's on board evaluating these crew chiefs. And then the detachment commander was also on that flight. He was a major, and in every single one of them, unfortunately, were killed in that crash. There were some struggles between the pilots. I think they lost the horizon a little bit, trusted the instruments. I'm not making any accusations of the pilots, but bottom line is they crashed, and it was fatal to everybody, including 11 or more Navy Special Warfare members. And in my first two deployments in Iraq, we we didn't lose anybody. We did have a couple wounded, but we didn't lose anybody. A crash is hard because it's a lot of loss of, it can be a lot of loss of life at one
Mhm.
time. And for that many people, I mean, it was upwards of 15, 16 people with the extra aviation personnel we had on board, as well as the passengers. And it was a big hit to the task force. And of course, I knew all those guys on there. It's something we all face when fellow service members that we know we
Mhm.
lose in battle. And that was the first big one that I had with people that I knew, and
Mhm.
especially with Josh. I've known him for a long time. We worked closely together in the Warlords, which arguably is the group of people that I have probably made the best, longest lasting relationships with in my Army career.
Agreed.
Probably because it was a small unit, small team, and it really forces and enables you to build those relationships with those people.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, having been through 100 unfortunately ramp ceremonies when there were people killed in action, that was the first time it was somebody that I was very close to. And then of course just the whole we did an impromptu ceremony not long after the crash where General Petraeus and the whole unit came together. And I know it was to provide closure, but it was powerful. It was hard,
Yeah.
but it was important. And I'll never forget that. It's it was not lost on me before that to understand the responsibility that we all carry, the value of human life. But it ties into, I'll talk more about this when we get to life after the Army. But what I want to share with people is that life is short, man. Life is short. Um, Looking back now, post COVID, having lost almost 10 really good friends to suicide,
Mm.
um, cancer. I lost a couple during COVID to COVID and other related illnesses tied with it. It gave me a chance to reflect back on life and realize, um, not that I didn't know this before, but it really impacted me. Like the value of human life,
Yeah.
the the value of our lives, and what I mean by that is that we don't waste no wasted days. And that's as an individual, that's as a husband, a father, a grandfather, all those things. Like um, you never know.
Never know.
I mean, it could be an aircraft crash, it could be a car crash, you might have a heart attack. It could be, I mean, and I don't say that flippantly. And Lord willing, it won't happen to any of us. We can all live long lives and whatever. But the reality of things is that it happens.
Yep.
And I learned and I've shared throughout, you know, at this time that we were talking about, as well as when I was gifted the chance to serve in other positions later on, and share with different groups of folks. Hey, you only get this short period of time here on Earth. So like, you got to figure out first. You got to figure out, I guess, what's important to you. You know, and if you're married, you probably need to have that conversation with your significant other,
Oh yeah.
and because you should figure that out individually, but you should also figure that out together.
Correct.
And then once you figure out what those important things are, like how are you going to structure your life, your career, whatever that is, so that it enables those things? And then, you might have to do like, this is where I want to be. This is where I am now. I
Mm.
need to do like a gap analysis.
Yep.
What do I need to do to make this happen? Maybe I got to get some education. Maybe I got to do some training. Got to get me some certifications. Maybe I got to build my network a
Yep.
little bit because relationships matter, right? Um, Maybe I got to live my life. I have to realize if I say that these things are, and write them down. My advice to people is write them down because I spent 20 plus years thinking in my mind, you know, this is important to me. I want to do these. But until I wrote them down,
Mm-hmm.
which didn't happen until I was a student at the Sergeant Major's Academy,
Mm.
and they made us write it down. And I developed a formal plan on how I was going to achieve, or how I planned to achieve, these things that were most important in my life. Once I did that, we've been planning our whole career, our whole military career. That's what we do.
Yep.
We plan things and we execute the plan. But until somebody showed me how to do that and made me write it down and helped me develop an action plan to achieve those things that I said was most important in my life. And by the way, most of them were not army things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it was, although there was part of it was the people in the army,
People.
um, but the rest of it was family, you know, um, legacy. What's going to be left behind? I want to give back to others in my family, others in my community. But how am I going to do all those things?
Mm-hmm.
I had to develop a plan. And by the way, what kind of person do I have to be? What kind of person do I want to be?
Yeah.
And if I say that this is what I want to be, I got to figure out a plan to do that as well
Yep.
for me. And I kept that when I went to the pre command course before I was a CSM at Leavenworth. I wasn't a CSM at Leavenworth. The course was at Leavenworth
Mm-hmm.
in Kansas. I had some great mentors, some retired generals and sergeant majors that helped us think through that process, right, and lay it all out. And it was hard, but I kept that little note in my wallet. I still got it in my wallet,
Mm-hmm.
and every now and then, and I would tell my students this when I was instructor. I'm like, hey, because I'd make them do it, even though they hated it, but I'd make them do it. And then I said, hey, pull that thing out every now and then, and use it as a metric
Yeah.
and evaluate yourself. How well are you holding up to the things that you said were the five most important things in your
Mm.
life, right?
Yeah.
How well are you doing? And I hurt my own feelings a few times.
Self accountability is a real thing.
Yeah, yeah,
I tell everybody that it'll bite you on your ass every time.
exactly. In a lot of ways.
Yeah. It's crazy. I remember the day I found out Josh passed away. I was at SEER school. I was a SEER instructor, thanks to you. Okay. Uh, and I remember how my heart sank because he's another one. He was with me on that mission in Afghanistan on Route 1. And just to see his level of commitment and sacrifice to helping other people, I knew immediately that he was a special individual. And I know I'll never. That's another important day in my military career. I remember when I found out the news. And the crazy thing is, unfortunately, in aviation, the way the Army works, anytime there's a loss of life, they black everything out, and it's hard to get that information. Right? You guys can't put it out. We just don't have access to the outside world. I'll never forget the day how I found out it was Josh. All aviators know about Army Air Crews. It's a website that we go to anytime there's a Class A accident. Class A accident, it's a loss of life, or I think it's $1 million worth of damage. I'm not sure on the dollar amount, but I know it's a loss of life. They will post it on that website. It's a third party outside the military. I just want to put that note out there, and that's where I found out. And when I found out, my heart sank, and it was tough because we. That's one thing, like you said, that 2008 group from the Warlords. We are one very tight group of people. I don't know what it was about that year. We all had a commonality. We all had certain struggles we were dealing with, but we were very, very close that year. I've never seen
It
any.
was 16 years ago.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it to this day. I've never been a part of another unit like that. Even when I was in the medevac, like Warlords, man, that was something special. So my my next question: what was your biggest takeaway? Was it what you just said about holding yourself accountable and making sure you live up to the expectations of what you say you're going to do, because life is short. And that's something I'm actually talking about now. Part of my whole coaching and like mentoring men and women is you have to figure out the person you want to give to the world, right? And once you figure that out, you have to do something every single day to make sure that happens. You just have to make sure it happens. If it doesn't, you're going to disappoint yourself, and in turn, you're going to disappoint a lot of people you love. So is that what you got from being in combat that much, or was it something else?
So it was. I was going to share something else, but they're both important, and I feel like and related actually. Um, the other big thing I'll remember is that I want to highlight today is during that deployment where you and I were in Afghanistan together. I was working a lot with our battalion chaplain at the time, Emmett Ferner, who's now like a colonel. Uh, Goofy dude from West Virginia as well. He was an enlisted Marine, went to college, came back in the Army as an infantry officer in 82nd Airborne Division. Did his time there. He was gonna get out and go to the FBI. In fact, he had a course date, I think, scheduled to go to the FBI Academy, and he felt God calling him to the ministry, and he did that. He went to um, Bible school, and then ended up coming back in the military as a chaplain, coming
Mm,
back in the Army, and he was our chaplain. Excuse me, there in Afghanistan. So yeah, so Emmett Ferner, he's I'll never forget. Like he was very visible and engaged with all of our people, and I really connected well with him because I it didn't take long for me anyway to realize that he really cared about people.
mm,
And I had met even by then as a first sergeant, I had met um, thousands of people throughout the army and in different positions, different ranks, whatever, that were responsible for people. But they talk a good game, but then let's just say that maybe they didn't put their money where their mouth was.
correct.
But this guy, who wasn't necessarily, he wasn't in command of anything, but he has a unique role as a chaplain to minister to the soldiers of our task force. And I mean, you could just tell after spending a little bit of time with this guy that he really cared about people,
Mm,
and he put his money where his mouth was. So I'm like, all right, I can get down with this dude, and I figured we could kind of team up with him. I'm like, I'm a first round. I can make a little happen, at least inside the battalion.
mm-hmm.
Outside the battalion, a little, but we all got people, and working with him. And one day he says, "Hey, I got this idea. Build this thing down here by the flat line, like a little coffee house or something, where people can come in and kind of kind of relax a little bit, but at the same time, like I'll have my little chaplain's office. It'll be forward, it'll be down there on the flight line where all the
Yeah,
soldiers are at." And I'm like, man, I love it. That's a great idea. And you remember how it went? Like it was,
yeah,
first of all, there's like it's the army, it's the government, and oh by the way, we're deployed, so there's like 10 million rules.
yeah.
Super bureaucratic. There's actually some board to build anything. It had to go before some board and get adjudicated by the general and blah blah blah. Bottom line is, I won't say I don't know how we made it happen. I'll say God made it happen,
I remember that.
and we ended up building this like 2-story coffee house. God and Lane Stair, who's love him or hate him, he's a friend of mine
Yeah.
as well, a former warlord, warrant
Hmm.
officer, pilot, and that dude could sell ice cream to Eskimos, and he could just get stuff. He's just one of those guys that like he could talk to people and get stuff. And somehow this dude got us enough supplies, lumber, materials, and we built this daggone thing. And then we had people in the States sending us donation, not monetary donations, but like
Yep.
supplies. And we outfitted this 2-story building that we built um, with to be a coffee house, really. And it turned out really nice. I mean, to where
Mhm.
we had the senior warrant in the battalion, we had company commander, we had everybody out there helping. We were painting it and slinging hammers, and at one point we had everything all the way up to the roof, and we couldn't figure out the roof piece. Like we knew the trusses were really important to the structure. We can't just throw this thing together. And we went like 3 or 4 weeks without making any progress on this thing. And so the brigade sergeant major and the division sergeant major come and they pulled me out, and they're like, "Look, it's kind of cool. We're not sure how you got permission to do this, but either finish it or we're tearing it down." So, I'm talking to Lane, I'm talking to Emmett Ferner, the chaplain. I'm like, what are we going to do? Like, we need somebody who knows something about the roof aspect, like um, the structure of the roof or whatever. And
Mhm.
it'd been a few days. Like Chaplain Ferner's literally praying about this, and all of a sudden, one of the test pilots from the Chinook company comes back. He's like, "Oh, I just got back off R&R." He's like, "Oh, that's cool." He's like, "Hey, I used to work in a factory where we made the trusses for the roofs." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I can help you with that." So he goes in there. Bottom line, he like helps us build this jig on the floor. He's like, "Yeah, just put the boards in here, cut them, put them in here, put them together. They'll be good." So I'll let you decide, how that came to fruition, but I know what I believe. Anyway, so we get over the next couple of weeks, we get all that stuff framed up, we get the roof on, it all gets put together. We got churches and individuals and all these people from the states that are sending companies as well that are volunteering and sending all this stuff in, from coffee to coffee pots to game systems and televisions to put inside this thing, and it turned out amazing. It turned out amazing, and it was. I say that I remember this one because of the journey of the construction, the whole process, but really was when it came to fruition. So one, it just happened. The grand opening happened to be when the Army Chief of Chaplains was on ground there in Bagram in Afghanistan, the senior chaplain of the entire United States Army. Um, our outgoing battalion commander was leaving because his wife was very sick with cancer.
Mhm.
We got the new battalion commander in. This all coincides, and then it opens, and it's just flooded with people from everywhere. Air Force, Army, in our unit, not in our unit, it doesn't matter. People hanging out, people volunteering to help run the operations. I mean, the coffee doesn't make itself, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
all this stuff, making popcorn, whatever it was. People buying stuff at the PX and bringing it down, video game stuff, and it was a great little like. area that people could come together, relax a little bit, whether it was when they were off shift or if maybe they had a lunch break or whatever. Somebody got theater seating from somewhere, the little fold down seats. I don't even know where that came from, but we got those and put them in there. People to sit down and play the little games on TV, and they loved it, man. And my point is, remembering that is one, the teamwork, because our company, the guys in our company and the warlords put a lot of time into building that thing from the ground up. I still got pictures of
Mhm.
that. Um, to the from when we were framing the foundation all the way to when we were painting the final stuff. Chaplain Ferner was able to get his office going up there. They were leading Bible studies. He was doing counseling. I mean, a lot of people are stressed. Chaplain has a big role
Yeah.
in counseling people that are struggling with things, either they're in the deployment site or back home, or both. It was just a great tool that we were able to use to the benefit of the people.
Yeah.
And I say all that to kind of segue to one of my other sort of lines of effort. It's an army term, I know. One of my focuses in life. It was less defined probably back then, but I was trying to do it, but I've deliberately put it on my in my plan now, where me individually, my wife and I collectively, and our family, that we do these things to serve other people,
Hmm.
and it's really about giving back. And that can look in a lot of ways, and that snapshot in time in our lives, the coffee house was a great thing for the soldiers, the airmen, the civilians, the contractors, everybody that was deployed to that area. What does that look like now in each of our lives? And I'd ask you to consider that, especially as not just you, Jason, but you, the listener, as
Yeah.
well. Um, in your life, in your circle, regardless, you may not be a military retiree like Jason and I are. Maybe you are, but at some point, um, I would offer that one of the most fulfilling things that you can do is to give back.
Hmm.
And I don't know exactly what that looks like in your life. Sometimes that might be just volunteering somewhere. Could be a hospital, could be the VA, could be a million different places that need help doing things for people. Lots of opportunity for that. Locally in El Paso, we've done at the food bank. We've done quite a bit. They worked us like heck at the food bank, man.
Yeah.
I thought I was at the gym for like 8 hours. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, doing things for homeless folks, um, I don't mean it as like a ticket punch. I don't mean it as like something. Hey man, here's $1. I mean like trying to really do something to help
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And
Genuine.
it's not about you, and I'll tell you that some of the darkest times I ever experienced in my life, one of the things that really helped me to feel better was to help other people.
That's why.
And it
That's
does.
why
It
I
just
created
makes you
the
feel
platform.
good. It makes you feel good,
Yeah.
but it also like it gives you perspective. Like when
Hmm.
you think, oh, my marriage sucks. Not my current marriage. My current marriage is amazing, by the
Yeah.
way. But my old marriage, it sucked. And I'm deployed a lot, and I miss my kids' lives or whatever, and XYZ. And then I go and show up to this place where people don't have food, or and we try to do some of that in Iraq and Afghanistan too.
Yep. Yep.
We go down to the hospital there in at Bagram and help little Afghani kids that would take them some toys or play with them for a little while, or
Yeah.
and realize it just helps you kind of keep life in perspective.
Correct. Correct. I agree. Let me ask you. So you retire from the army after 30 years. What was that decision like first off? Because usually people do 20 and they're out the door. What made you decide to do 30, all right? And after you did retire, I want you to talk about your LLC, your company.
Right, so, while we're in Kandahar on my fourth, well, actually fifth back-to-back deployment, year-long deployment, fourth combat deployment. I'm about to drop my retirement paperwork because I'm just shooting straight with everybody. Like I've been a first sergeant for 5 years straight, deployed. What I just told you, it was a lot of stress, and I was approaching burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And the sergeant major was like, "Hey, man, this for the first time in my career, I had not been selected like below zone, or even like
Mm,
I'd been passed over a couple times."
yeah.
And at some point, you realize it's a numbers game. If the Army only needs 8 and there's 100 people out there, then they're only going to pick 8. And if
They're
you're
only
not
picking
in the
8.
top
Yep.
8, and by the way, it's super competitive at
Very
those
competitive.
levels, you know, um, and that's okay. That's okay. It took me a while to realize like who I am and in life doesn't depend on a patch that I wear or what my rank is or anything like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but he talked me into it. I was praying about it. I'm like, all right, I'll put my packet in one more time and see, and I get selected to
Hmm.
attend the Sergeant Major's Academy, which was exciting and scary. So I just spent 13 years in the same battalion, uh, doing the same thing: deploy for a year, come home for a year, deploy for a year, come home for a year. Stressful, but also like I knew my schedule. I knew what was going on.
Uh, you were used to it.
Thanks to the brigade sergeant major fighting to keep me, a couple high school stabilization packets getting dropped because of my kids reaching that age. That's what enabled me to stay in that unit for so long. But then that happens, and now I'm looking at and all these senior folks are telling me, hey, you just added another 5 years minimum to your career. And by this time, 2011 is when I found out. I mean, that was my 20-year mark. So I'm like, okay, 5 more years. That's 25 years. We'll see how this goes. My body was already starting to break down. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't, by that time, I couldn't run. Uh, I was on a profile, run own pace and distance or whatever, but
Yeah.
I had plantar fasciitis and 20 years in and 5 deployments,
All
it
the
wears
good
on
stuff.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, all the good stuff. Like,
Yeah.
they don't give you that VA disability for nothing, Jason. You know what
That's
I mean?
right.
Like,
Hey, you earned that shit.
like, we didn't talk about wearing Mop 2 for 72 days straight in OIF 1, but no, it's good. Uh, I said, well, we'll take this journey. We'll see where this goes.
Hmm.
I knew I was going to do another 5 years. I went to the course. It was amazing. Like, I was away from the hangar and the flight line for a little bit. I say that not to put down aviation, but it opened my eyes a little bit because I was a student, so I'm drinking from the fire hose,
Hmm.
um, and I'm surrounded by 600 other Type A master sergeants and sister services and international students that are all geniuses and uh, unlike me. They're all like, oh, I'm just going to be the sergeant major in my army and blah blah blah. I'm like, I'm a helicopter mechanic,
Yeah.
and no, it's all good, man. But I really learned a lot. And I really learned some of the things I've shared already. Like I learned the power of the network.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and for those of us who are enlisted, and really it's not just enlisted, warrant officers saying it doesn't matter. It's networking 101, right? It's not I don't mean the good old boy system. I mean the power of relationships and developing those relationships with people that you know and trust, and how that can help enable you. And sometimes that helps or you can use that to help your organization. You can use that to help you personally.
Definitely.
You can use that to help your community, whatever it is, but it's people. It's timeless.
Yep.
But we forget that sometimes, I think, in today's modern technology and
It's
the
crazy because
power of
that's something
relationships.
I agree with you 100% on. And a lot of people, a lot of successful people that I do know, that's the one thing they talk about. And this is one thing I would tell myself if I had to go back in life and tell the younger Jason something is understand the power of relationships, building relationships with people, nurturing and pouring into other people, investing in them, actually giving a damn about somebody else. And that right there is going to take you a far way in life. And the crazy thing about it, and I've learned this as a gym owner for the last 5.5 years, you're going to pour into a lot of people and they may not pour back into you and they may not give you that same energy. But as long as you're doing it from the heart and you actually care about people, you're going to see your blessings multiply.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. And there's that, and it's I heard some guy call it one time generational leadership. So like you uh you may never see the results
Mm.
of some of the, let's call it the seeds that you sow, right? So like if you're
Yep.
a farmer, you plant the seeds, right? So from a leadership development, or it's just a networking thing, I'm pouring my heart into people to help make them better. Um, I may never see, or it may be a long time. It may be 16 years later when I see young Chief Warrant Officer 2, Jason Santiago, ended up becoming like this very successful maintenance test pilot, SEER instructor, do all these great things, become an entrepreneur, gym ownership, becoming a coach, all those things, you know, or you may never see it. Sometimes you see it later, sometimes you never
Mm-hmm.
see it.
Yeah.
But it's also with generational leadership, it's like some of the people that you invested in, they're going to turn around and they're going to invest in other people, you know, and it's
Yep.
kind of like a pyramid effect. And then we'll never get everybody, you know, we don't have to get everybody.
That's
I
right.
believe a smart guy I know told me that, and I believe it, that God has placed us in a circle of people that gives us an opportunity to invest in our lives and their lives. And from a spiritual aspect, I say connect them with the love and the life of Jesus Christ. But
Mm-hmm.
from a it, it's not necessarily all about the spiritual realm. I mean, there's life. We're all in this thing together. You know, and
That's
you and I
right.
talked on the phone the other day. One of the things I love the most about the military, and it's one of the reasons that we settled in El Paso, because it's so it's so diverse, right? It's so culturally diverse, but it doesn't matter. We don't care what your skin color is. We don't care what your gender is. We don't care. And a lot of companies or whoever people will say that. But one of the things I loved about the military is, other than a couple weirdo, people that get highlighted because they get in trouble and they're stupid, the
Yeah.
vast majority of people are like that. Like, we don't care.
We
when
don't
when you're the
care.
medevac pilot and the guy's on the ground because he's all shot up, you're coming in there. You don't care if he or she is white, black, Hispanic, whatever gender, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a
Doesn't
person.
matter.
It's a soldier. And we're coming, right? And the guy or gal on my left or right, like, we're fighting for them because our lives depend on it too. And it doesn't matter what they look like or where they're from. Or hell, half the people that not half, but a good number of people I served in the Army with weren't even born in the US, And that's okay.
Yep.
Because
Okay.
guess what? We all bleed the same, man. And
Facts.
and in the end, you know, uh, so one of the powerful things I learned as a first sergeant, and I learned this. It's not like I came in there like I knew it all. I had a CW4 whose daughter um, attempted suicide, and I showed up at the hospital, and there was some whoever was the chaplain on call. There was like some issues or whatever with trying to get the right on duty chaplain, and it didn't happen. I'm not punking out the chaplains. Oh my, I love chaplains. I love them. But there were some problems. I made a couple phone calls. They made some phone calls. The brigade commander got on the line and was like, "First Sergeant, thank you for calling me. Um, I'll fix it." And we got somebody down there. The most important thing is, I'm not
Yeah.
highlighting me doing anything. The most important thing is one a, a person that I cared about that was in my organization was in a time of crisis and needed some help, and I was able to contact somebody who could come provide help that I couldn't provide,
Yep.
uh, and and they did that, and thankfully that turned out well afterwards. But I say all that to say the lesson I learned is we're all people, man. Whether you're a private or a sergeant or a warrant officer or a colonel or whatever, we're all people. We all have
Yep.
families and friends. We all struggle with the same struggles, and we all need love and care and friendship and help
Yep.
sometimes. And and to realize that, by the way, that's not just a military thing. Like,
Yeah, that's a life thing.
yeah, people in your community are the same way,
Yeah.
right? We're all
That,
we're all the
there's
we're
one
all
thing I realized dealing with the public, which I love to do, is there's a lot of broken people out there, man. There's a lot of people that need help, they need mentorship, they need genuine stuff. Because there's a lot of excuse my language, there's a lot of bullshit going out there in the world nowadays.
yeah.
But they need genuine people to try to lead them, mentor them, and try to point them in the right direction. Because there's a lot of lost people out there. People are hurting. So what's next for Jamie? You done with 30 years. You traveled all over the United States with your lovely wife for the last 2 years. What's next for Jamie? What do you have going on now? What do you want the world to know about? How can I help you? Because that's the biggest thing, networking, right? I wanna put you on a platform to get your word out there and get to do some work for you as well. So what's next for you, and what can I do to help you?
Let me tell you a quick story. So, 2021, um, I've been divorced for a little over a year. I had met, let's see, probably mid 2021. I met Melissa, who's my current wife,
Mm-hmm.
my forever wife, and we weren't obviously we weren't married at the time, but we were came together, and we're both approaching retirement.
Mm-hmm.
For enlisted, if once you hit 30 years, if you don't work for a general,
Yeah, you
then
gone.
it's mandatory. It's mandatory retirement, right? So,
Yep.
and after dealing with COVID and all that craziness, and being, I would love being an instructor at the Sergeant Major's Academy. There was some great. I got promoted into some administrative roles after that, and there were some great parts of that too. But you know, with great power comes great responsibility, and
That's right.
it was challenging, and um, I I got to give a shout out to all the commanders that I ever worked with, because my last two jobs in the Army, I signed assumption of command orders at an NCO academy where I was at one position battalion level command and the next to brigade level command during COVID, which was awesome. And by awesome, I mean it sucked because
Yeah.
everything during COVID was crazy,
Yeah.
especially in the Army. But but we looked at, Melissa and I looked at all the stuff that you and I have talked about, the important like life lessons that you and I have talked about for the last couple hours, and realize, life is short. Let's figure out what's important. What do we want to do? So we sold our houses. We bought a big dually truck and a big fifth wheel RV, and we traveled the country for, man, almost 3 years. And it was awesome. We had four things we wanted to do. We wanted to go see our country because there's so much of it that we hadn't seen. And it kind of appreciate the freedom of that, and of retirement, military retirement, which is a blessing, amazing blessing. We wanted to reconnect with friends and family. And let me tell you, I think that was actually, even though we saw some amazing, beautiful places, friends and family was probably my absolute favorite part. I'm sorry that I missed you with our short time in Tennessee, but at the time in 2022 when we came through there, but I had to go see my grandbabies in Clarksville.
No, I get that. Yeah, I ain't
Sorry
mad about that.
I got you next time. Don't worry.
I'm gonna hold you
But
to
man,
that.
no, seriously, absolutely. And I know I told you we got the Oasis down here in El Paso. Come on down. So,
Yeah.
but we got to visit some people along our route, and it was amazing. It was amazing to reconnect with some of those folks that we had either served with in all those years across the military, or family members that we hadn't seen in a long time. And it was fantastic. That we were trying to figure out where we wanted to build our forever home, And although we found some Michigan in the summer, if you've never been, we've only been once, but it is beautiful. Like if you don't go to the Upper
It
Peninsula of
is.
Michigan in the summer, if you've never been there, make some time. Go.
Let
If
me
you've
check
never
it
been
out.
to Yellowstone and Yosemite and Glacier National Park and Zion National Park and Arches National Park, there's so many cool places. Go. But in the wintertime, those places are like 30 feet deep in snow. And Army made cold not fun for me.
It ain't fun for
So
anybody. I hate the cold.
yeah, no. I mean, it's cool to visit, and some people love to live there, and God bless you. But we decided for a number of reasons to come back to El Paso where we retired. It did help that 3 of our 4 kids were here. But man, the weather's good. There's not hurricanes here. We're not burning the place down here. There's no tornadoes. You might get a sandstorm every now and then, and if it rains more than an inch, we'll get a little bit of flooding. But the greatest Mexican food in the U.S. The people are amazing, and the cost of living is pretty good too.
Yeah, nice.
But one of the other last thing I was going to tell you that we wanted to do when we were traveling was try to give back. It was hard to do because we were moving a lot. We were like jumping the talk every 3 days. It was crazy. We did a little bit. Mostly when we stopped to visit folks to be able to get back there. But we've dedicated that time here, and we continue to try to give back to people in our community. So what's in the future for us? We've been spending the last 16 months after traveling. We settled down here a little bit. We've been building a house. Well, we call it our desert oasis, our forever home. We're about wrapping up the last few bits of that. And the goal of that was to draw kids and grandkids in. We did a couple little fancy things in here to help do that. But it's also, we wanted to make it a place for friends who have the opportunity or who are in the neighborhood to come. Hey man, we got a place for you. Not only do we have a 4-bedroom house, we got some extra bedrooms, obviously, that she and I and the dog, but we also got the RV here. So we got your own little apartment. If that's your thing, you want that. We got full hookups, so you can have that as well. We got a little swimming pool, whatever. I don't say all that to brag. Please don't take it that way. We basically took our life savings together and are building this so that we can offer it up for friends and family as a place to come and know that this is a place of trust. This is a place where we can help take care of you. You can relax. We can lean into each other, kind of build each other up. And that's an important part of what we want to do in the rest of our lives. We talked about, you briefly mentioned our LLC. So we established a leadership development and consulting company in the great state of Texas called Map Your Journey LLC. And it's primarily focused on leadership development. Although we absolutely do the vast majority of what we do pro bono. I try to do a lot of stuff on social media to help anybody, but really what I try to focus on is people that are in the military and transitioning military. If nothing else, just to share lessons learned. And I know you can look on social media and find a million different versions of that.
Yep.
But sometimes, even though there's a lot of that stuff out there, it doesn't hit everybody. So what I share with people as you're getting ready to transition is, and it ties into what we talked about, things that are most important. So you got to get your financial piece straight before you retire. So a couple lessons learned. Try to get as much out of debt as possible if you are in debt before you retire or transition.
Yep.
Not everybody that's in the military retires. Definitely need to look at civilian life insurance. And you can do that by investing as little as, especially we encourage our kids and our younger folks that we know in their 20s, even in their 30s, start investing now. Roth is best because a Roth IRA, a Roth 401k, or if you're a government employee, a Roth TSP. Why do I say Roth? Because every single penny that you put into that and the growth, by the way, the growth is 1,000,000 times more than what you put into it, is going to be tax-free on the backside.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put, $20,000 into Roth IRA over 30 years, and it grows to be 1.5 million, not only is the 20,000 that you put into it tax-free, but the 1.2 million is also tax-free. So that's huge, understanding that. It was sold to me a little different when Roth TSP first came out. They're like, oh, you got to do the math and figure out if you're going to be in a better tax bracket when you retire or whatever. I would offer for most folks that if you're eligible, just go Roth. That's my opinion. I'm not a financial professional. It's just my experience. So term life insurance, get your investment straight, get out of debt, make a budget and write it down. If you've never done it, I didn't do it for years and years and years. We finally did it, and now I live by it. It's
I
like a
live by a
calendar.
budget.
We look at it every month.
Yeah.
When we stick to it, instead of wondering, I wonder where all my money is going. Tell your money tell every dollar where it's going.
Correct.
It's fantastic. And I do all that where I'm very privileged. We're very privileged. We're very blessed. My beautiful wife and I, to have the military retirement. I'm thankful for the Department of Veterans Affairs and our VA disability. I do all my medical care through the VA. In El Paso, our VA is amazing. I love them. They do everything we need them to do.
Shout out to the
And
VA in Nashville too. They're very good. I had no issues with them. Good place.
man, and they have a traveling veterans program. So when we were traveling, we were able to use them as well. And of course, as a retiree, we have TRICARE if we need it. Not everybody's a retiree, and I get that.
Yeah.
But my point is, is everyone has to figure out for them, make a plan. You're not in control of everything. We all know that in life, but worry about the things that you can control, develop a plan based on the fact that life is short, and to focus on those things that we said are most important to you. Remember the power of relationships, the network to get done the things that we need to get done. People can help you, if that's a job placement. If you get a referral to a job, you're 11 times more likely to get that job than if you're just straight up applying online, So
I didn't know
LinkedIn can
that.
be a powerful tool if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, to work for someone else. If you want to be an entrepreneur, there's so many things available out there to help you, for veterans, for even non-veterans. There's a place called SCORE. If you just Google SCORE, it's an organization that helps people become business owners. They have mentors.
Yep.
They do all this for free. We have
They're in every city too.
every city. The Small Business Association is, that's a federal government
Yep.
entity. A lot of cities have the small business development centers. They also will help you do the research. If you want to develop your own company, they'll help you do a lot of the research that it takes to get in that area. And in most states, it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to establish your own business. I like an LLC. Everybody's situation is different. There's some legal protections from an LLC. We're kind of shifting. We're still going to do some leadership development stuff. Watch for that in the future. It might be a little while as we're trying to finish up our little forever home and our future homestead, our
Yeah.
little desert homestead. It's not easy to farm in the desert, but we're doing a little bit. We got some fun fruit trees. My wife likes making fun of me. We just got a banana tree. I got a pineapple plant. We got figs. We got blackberries.
Got it going on over there.
We got all kinds of
So
crazy stuff.
if someone wants to find you, where can they find you on social media?
So, I mean, you can find my personal page, Jamie Halchishick, on Facebook. That's where the old people still are, is on Facebook. We do have Map Your Journey on Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. You can find both my personal page and Map Your Journey on LinkedIn. We really try to focus on, the company is leadership development, professional development, strategic development. But in reality, I've done that once or twice with a company. We did do that with a fairly large entity here in El Paso, $1 million annual budget, plus help them to establish their strategic goals and develop an action plan to achieve those goals. But that was 2 years ago. In reality, the vast majority of what we're doing right now, I say pro bono. We're just doing it for free. We don't do it under the guise of the company. We're just doing it as people trying to help our brothers and sisters be successful. And I do a lot of that on social. I try to do a lot of that on social media.
Yeah.
Different forums, different groups, on my page, whatever. I'm not a master of these things. I'm not a legal professional. I'm not a financial professional, but I've lived 50 plus years and experienced a lot of stuff. So I shared lessons learned on some smart people that I've dealt with. We are going to try to kind of ramp that up a little bit in the next year or two, as well as we establish our little desert homestead where we're trying to be self-sufficient as much as we can. Like we're not off grid or anything like that. We do have some solar. We live in Sun City. We got 320 days of sunshine, so it made sense to make the investment on solar. We're what are we, like 85% right now, self-sustained electric wise, and it can be expensive in some areas.
My last question for today: if you had to go back and talk to 18-year-old Jamie, what's the one thing you're gonna tell him? One thing.
Man, that's a great question. So I think it would be not remember. For a young person, I'd say you got to figure out what's most important to you. So that can be career. Obviously, career is important. I would offer that in a marriage type relationship, telling you from someone who spent 26 years married to the wrong person, and as hard as it is for me to say, I don't know that I would undo that because of my children.
Correct.
Like I would never undo my children. I love them dearly.
Mm-hmm.
But as I found out later in life, when you meet the person that God has created for you, your person, and uh, there's a lot of like implied tasks there. You have to know, you have to think about, and we don't. I didn't as a young person. Maybe it was because I didn't have a father figure that invested and developed, mentored me in that way to think about. I don't know. I'm not trying to blame anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking about lessons learned, right? So
Yeah.
figure out, what do you want in life? Because what you want in life will inform what you want in a partner, in a spouse. And then when you guys come together, you can figure that out together. It's not easy. You figure it out
Ain't
together,
easy.
what you want in life, in your career. And I learned a few years ago, Stanford University did this program called Design Your Life. So one of the things I used to teach when I was an instructor at Sergeant Major's Academy was design. Design is a planning methodology. Um, it's kind of like outside the box thinking, if you will, a little bit bigger picture, more strategic level thinking.
Yeah.
Um, but it was developed by the Israelis actually in the early 70s. But America, of course, we've modified it. And in this university, they use these concepts to say, design your life. And again, you're not going to be able to control every little aspect of your life or whatever, but you can put things in place when you figure out what's most important to you. And by the way, that may change over time. 19-year-old Hal had different priorities than 50-year-old Hal. I was telling you, right? So,
Correct.
and you can adjust that plan as you go.
Yep.
But once you establish those priorities, you can develop a plan, like I talked about before. You can do it, and it's not anything complicated. You can develop an action plan on how you're going to achieve those things. You do the gap analysis. What do I got to do? I got to go to school. I got to get this certificate. Maybe I don't do. Maybe I want to be a welder. It doesn't have to be like a PhD in whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just depends. Everybody wants to do different things. Different things make different people happy. You know, once you figure that out individually and collectively as a married couple and as a family, and you put a plan in place to achieve those things, you develop relationships along the way to help you be successful in that. You realize that you need to focus on those things that are important, because what do we say? Life is short. Let me tell
Yep.
you, it didn't seem that long ago when I was the 19-year-old punk in Korea carrying everybody's tripods and radio batteries and my 249 and all this other stuff. And all of a sudden, blink, I'm retired. I got 3 grandchildren, and hopefully many more on the way. I'm past the halfway point, man. You know what I mean? Like, for real.
Yeah, bro.
Like,
I know.
you got to realize what's most
Real
important. Don't waste your life. Don't waste your life. Life is important. Life is precious. Life is short.
impression.
And I don't mean that in like a YOLO aspect. Like, hey, let's go. We're gonna go cliff jumping tomorrow. No, that's not what
No.
I'm saying. I mean, cliff jumping might be your thing, but that's not. It's not my thing. Um,
Yeah, ain't mine
I
either.
want to focus. I want to focus on family. I want to focus on people that need help. I want to focus on things that will make a difference in my life and the life of my family and the life of my community. And sometimes the community is the people I live by, and sometimes my community is my brothers and sisters that I served with, and sometimes my community is the people that I go to church with, and sometimes my community is my brother Jason that I served with 16 years ago in the 101st
Yeah.
Airborne Division in Afghanistan. And we all work together to help each other,
Yep.
to give back to the community, and establish, to go back to what I said in the beginning about the talk I had with my son, right? About how we're going to break, damn it, we're going to break this streak of bad fathers in our family, and we're going to create a legacy. And it's, trust me, it's not just about me, because two or three generations from now, nobody will know my name. It's this kind of a
It's a sad
sad,
truth.
scary,
Yeah, sad
yeah.
truth.
But I'll tell you, I know my kids, and I know Melissa's kids. We have a combined Brady Bunch, family of 4 growing, and I promise you, we are investing in the lives of our kids and in their kids, because 2 generations from now, we're not going to be around. But we know that the impact that we made on our children,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe their children, and the impact that they're having on their children and their children's children, it's going to be generational,
Yep.
And I would just
Yep.
ask that people have that forward thinking to do those things. I'm not trying to preach. I'm not trying to be high and mighty. I'm thankful. Like we talked about in the beginning, I came from a humble start, growing up in a double wide mobile home, to even some crappier stuff in the stepfather life that we didn't get down into the details on, but to get where I am now, to be very blessed through some of the ups and downs of life, the mountaintops and the crucible experiences, to bring lessons learned, and I'm trying to share them today, man. I'm thankful
There you
for my
go,
brothers
man.
and sisters in the Army, in especially in Army Aviation. That's what we're focused on talking about on this podcast. I have met some of the most amazing people in my life, who are either turning wrenches or wiggling the sticks up front in the aircraft, or manning the gun, calling clear right, being the professional review mirror, being the flight medic, and everything that makes all of that stuff come together and happen. As amazing people from all over the country and all over the world, and I love every single one of them. They're my brothers, they're my
Yep.
sisters. Some of them are kind of young, so they're more like my kids, but
uh,
but it's powerful. It's powerful when we work together towards a common goal, because we have differences, of course,
yeah, it
but
doesn't
in
matter
the
though.
end, nah, man, we're all people. We all bleed
Yep.
the same. I don't care what you look like, where you come from. We're all people. We care about the same things, and hopefully, and that's each other, and trying to do best by each other. And if there's anything I can do for you, Jason, or anything I can do for any of our listeners, not that I can do a lot, but if there's anything I can,
No,
please reach out. Again, you can reach me on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, either Jamie Halchishick or Map Your Journey, or
and I'll have all those
shoot me an email.
details. I have all those details provided. So, Jamie, it's been an absolute pleasure today, man. Getting caught up with you. I've known you for a long time, and I've even learned more about you today, and I greatly appreciate that. And I'm gonna take you up on that offer. I'm gonna come down to El Paso. I'm gonna come see you.
Come on, man, waiting on you.
All right, brother. Well, I appreciate
Hey,
you.
I appreciate you,
Good.
brother. It's been my great privilege, and I mean that with all my heart. I don't say any of this to do anything for me. Uh, I really do want to give back, and if, like I said, if there's anything I can do for you or anybody else, please just reach out and I'll do everything that I can. I may not be able to do a lot personally, but I know a lot of people just by virtue of my 30-year career, people I met after the Army. So if you need some help with something, please let me know.
Will do, brother. I appreciate you, and you take it easy, all right? This
You
is
too, man.
This is Jason Santiago with Heroes Have Wings. My great buddy Jamie Halchishick, and we're out today.
Warlords.
Thank you for tuning in to Heroes Have Wings, where we honor the extraordinary stories of grit, sacrifice, and resilience. Remember, every hero's journey starts with a single step, so take yours today. If you love this episode, like, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep pushing limits, breaking barriers, and living your truth. I'm your host, Jason Santiago, and this is Heroes Have Wings, where legends rise.